When the Crimson Reaper's motorcycle gang cornered an elderly nun at St. Catherine's Church during evening prayers, they believed they had discovered an easy target. For months, they had been terrorizing Shadow Ridge, intimidating everyone who stood in their way, and extorting local businesses. However, they made a grave error when they threatened Sister Eleanor Harper's community outreach program. They were unaware that her brother wasn't your typical protective relative. With more than 200 documented kills and decades of experience chasing the most hazardous targets in the world, he was Master Sergeant Sam Harper, one of the Marine Corps' most lethal snipers. The infamous Crimson Reapers would suffer a terrible lesson about picking the wrong family to threaten by the time he was done. A brief silence before we go on. Please let us know where you are watching from. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're liking these stories, as tomorrow's episode is going to be incredible. As Sister Eleanor Harper put flowers at St. Catherine's altar, the aroma of burning leaves wafted through Shadow Ridge in the fall breeze. Through the stained glass windows, shafts of afternoon sunshine created vibrant patterns on the weathered oak pews. She continued to walk with grace and precision at the age of 62, each gesture reflecting her lifelong commitment to service. Eleanor, sister. Young Carlos Ramirez showed up at the church doorway, clutching his rucksack anxiously to his chest. Can I come back here to study? My father. His day is not going well. Carlos, of course. For people in need of serenity, the church is always open. The kindness that had made Sister Eleanor a revered figure in Shadow Ridge for more than 30 years was evident in her voice. Have you have anything to eat today? Sister Eleanor pointed to the tiny office behind the altar while Carlos shook his head. From the youth center, I think Sister Claire packed extra sandwiches. How about helping yourself? Father Thomas O'Malley came out of the confessional as Carlos rushed for the promise of food. Eleanor, another one of your strays. When the mill shuttered, his father was laid off. Like far too many others, they are currently struggling. Concern furrowed Father O'Malley's old features. Speaking of difficulties, this morning the Crimson Reapers visited Martinez's food store. When I stopped for bread, poor Eduardo was unable to even look me in the eye. Money for protection? Sister Eleanor's tone became a little more stern. This week's third business. They're approaching the church district with more confidence. Prior to his final deployment, Sister Eleanor felt the silver cross that her brother Sam had given her at her neck. Father, this community has weathered hardships before. These men are linked and well organized, unlike this. It appears that the cops are hesitant to get involved. Their chat was interrupted by the roar of motorcycles in the distance. Father O'Malley's face darkened as he walked to the window. In relation to devils. The chrome on 7 motorcycles gleamed in the afternoon sun as they drew into the church parking lot. Dominic Viper Salvatore, their commander, dismounted with a commanding presence. The Crimson Reaper's emblem, a hooded figure riding a motorcycle with a scythe hoisted aloft, was emblazoned on his leather cut. Go to the back room, Carlos, Sister Eleanor said softly. If necessary, use the old maintenance tunnel. Eleanor. O'Malley, father, paused. Maybe we ought to call the police. And take the chance that they might harm someone else because we were afraid? Number father, everyone is still welcome in God's house. Even the ones who have gotten lost. Swinging open were the huge wooden doors. With his boots resonating on the marble floor, Viper went in first. He had 2 more cyclists on either side. Hammer Davis and Blaze Peterson are well known in Shadow Ridge for their violent tendencies. Eleanor Harper, a sister. Viper sounded more menacing in some way because of the attempted civility in his voice. I hope we're not interfering with prayer. Though he might like it if you took off your hat in his home, Mr. Salvatore, God's ears are always open. Viper took off his leather cap slowly, a menacing smirk spreading across his face. It's funny because my true name is no longer used by most people in town. Just as God knows why you're actually here, He knew you as Dominic before you decided to be Viper. Blaze walked toward the altar, tracing the glossy wood with a gloved hand. You have a nice place here, sister. If something were to happen to it, feel embarrassed. Mr. Peterson, the church has been there for 120 years. It endured earthquakes, fires, and those who believed their own might outweighed religion. Viper's grin dimmed. Sister, times are changing. Shadow Ridge is evolving. Astute individuals are opting to adjust. To agree. Defense. We're already safe. Sister Eleanor's fingers clenched around her rosary, but her voice stayed steady. By what means? Holy water and prayer beads. Hammer's laughter reverberated forcefully around the hallowed room. That won't prevent accidents from occurring. Windows shatter. Candles topple over. Did Eduardo's store end up like that? A mishap? Viper moved up closer, towering above the old nun with his height. Sister, you manage a lot of community programs here. Help the homeless, feed the needy, and guide troubled children. Well done. It would be awful if something got in the way of that. Sister Eleanor slowly looked into his eyes. Mr. Salvatore, are you endangering God's work? Merely stating the facts. No mishaps are guaranteed with 2,000 every month. Special price for the church. For the sake of respect. What if we say no? Then hope that your insurance is fully paid. A candelabra was knocked over by Blaze, breaking wax on the marble floor. Your deadline is Friday. Viper started to walk away, then stopped. And sister, too. Keep that in mind when the mishaps begin. This is what you selected. Outside, the motorcycles roared to life, their thunder progressively vanishing. Carlos and Father O'Malley came out of the rear room, both of them looking frightened. Eleanor. The cops must be called. Detective Romano would feel under pressure to ignore it, similar to Eduardo's store. Sister Eleanor stepped forward to tidy up the shattered candle. Father, no. This calls for an alternative form of intervention. She produced an ancient flip phone that had not been used for some months. She prayed she would never have to use the number, but she knew it by heart. It's Eleanor, Sam. We need you, even though I know you're training recruits. You are needed in Shadow Ridge. As the sun started to set over St. Catherine's Church, the shattered wax on the floor was caught in the departing light, which looked like blood drops. The Crimson Reapers would discover in a day why the final error they would ever make in Shadow Ridge was to attack Sister Eleanor Harper. Using binoculars, Master Sergeant Sam Harper observed his cadets in the harsh desert light at Camp Pendleton's sniper training site. In the intense heat, 6 guys lay still, their camouflage fitting in nicely with the surroundings. The little change from position 3 would have gone unnoticed by most instructors, but Sam hadn't built his name on overlooking minutiae. Harrison. Calm yet forceful, he talked into his radio. Nose scratches are not common among dead guys. Restart the exercise. The recruits stood up, their actions showing their dissatisfaction. Sam was approached by Harrison, a talented shooter who was yet too agitated. I held my position for 43 minutes, sir. Again, if you blow it in the 44th minute, 43 minutes of flawless concealment is meaningless in the field. Sam's palm twitched in response to the vibration from his encrypted phone, a signal he had set up for family crises. Eleanor's number reminded me of the last time they spoke, which was at their parents' cemetery 6 months prior. He approached the command center and said, Martinez, take over. He had not heard the edge in his sister's voice since they were children, when she had confronted bullies 3 times her size. Detective Isabella Bella Romano sat in her inconspicuous automobile in Shadow Ridge, looking through tinted windows at the clubhouse of the Crimson Reapers. Overnight, 3 additional establishments who had declined the gang's protection reported vandalism. Dozens of identical occurrences, all officially unresolved, were recorded in her notebook. Investigator. Through her radio, Officer Turner's voice crackled. Downtown provided another report. A brick was thrown through the glass of St. Catherine's food bank. Bella gripped her steering wheel more tightly. Are there any witnesses? Sister Eleanor claims she didn't see anything, but she has moved everything to the church basement and is continuing serving meals. That woman is either the most courageous or the most insane person in the community. Bella turned on her vehicle. I'm on my way there right now. Sister Eleanor quietly managed volunteers at St. Catherine's, turning the basement into a temporary soup kitchen. Businesses in the area that were unable to publicly oppose the Crimson Reapers privately expressed their support. Vegetables from the Chen family's eatery and fresh bread from Eduardo's supermarket. As they set up tables, Sister Eleanor said to Father O'Malley, the kids shouldn't have to go up these stairs. Many are crippled or old. Detective Romano said, coming down the stairs, the kids shouldn't have to live in fear either. You know who did this, sister. Let me assist you. Do you mean that you assisted the Chens or Eduardo? Sister Eleanor's voice was one of sorrow rather than accusation. Detective, how many complaints have vanished from the station? Bella flinched. The relationships between the Crimson Reapers are intricate. Yes, they were very explicit about that when they visited yesterday. Sam Harper, meantime, gained access to encrypted records that were not officially there at Camp Pendleton. The picture painted by the Crimson Reapers file was unsettling. Drug trafficking, protection rackets, and possible connections to more extensive criminal networks. He noticed something. It had been no accident that they had spread into Shadow Ridge. Sir. His helper showed up at the door. Although your leave has been granted, there is another issue. The Crimson Reapers are no longer merely a neighborhood gang. The FBI has a task team. Sam concluded, still reading, that's going too slowly. How many ancient units are still accessible? Sanders may be found in 29 Palms, Fort Irwin, Matthews. Johnson is currently a local civilian. Sam made calls while nodding. Every old teammate answered right away. They hadn't forgotten their connection, having served and bled together. After lunch, Sister Eleanor escorted an old couple back to Shadow Ridge by the rear exit in the basement. With their grandson working at a store and paying protection money, they couldn't take the chance of being spotted accepting food from the church. Detective Romano, feeling more and more powerless, observed from her car, recording everything. A text message from an unidentified number buzzed through her phone. St. Catherine's, get out of here. Some things take care of themselves. Sam's SUV went over the Shadow Ridge city limit as the sun was sinking. Although he had changed into civilian clothes, he still had a military bearing. Unaware that their days of tormenting this town were coming to an end, he witnessed 3 Crimson Reapers speed by at a red light. As he moved into positions throughout town, his phone buzzed with reports from his squad. Johnson had local contacts ready to assist, Matthews was setting up surveillance, and Sanders had the high ground secured. With the shattered window now boarded over, Sister Eleanor concluded evening prayers. Before she saw her brother's beam swing into the church parking lot, she could feel him coming. Sam Harper emerged from his SUV with the same quiet assurance he had had since he was a little boy, albeit with a more worn appearance than when she had last seen him. She gave him a tight hug and added, "You shouldn't have come." He said plainly, "Family takes care of family. Tell me everything you know about our friend Viper's surgery now." Dominic Viper Salvatore got his own text concerning Sam's entrance inside the Crimson Reapers clubhouse. He answered right away. Learn everything there is to know about this brother. Everybody has weaknesses. He was unaware that Sam Harper had spent 2 decades removing his flaws. The Crimson Reapers' attack on Sister Eleanor was not merely a threat to a nun, it was the beginning of a conflict for which they were completely unprepared. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining, it means a lot to us. Let's return to the narrative. Shadow Ridge was enveloped in darkness as Sam Harper started getting ready. The Crimson Reapers would discover in a day that some people are shielded by more than religion, and that certain mistakes have much more serious repercussions than they could have ever imagined. As Sam Harper surveyed the town from the bell tower of St. Catherine, dawn broke over Shadow Ridge. He watched 3 motorcycles from the Crimson Reapers circle Eduardo's grocery shop via his binoculars. This morning, the 4th of these passed. They were anxious, because guys who are anxious tend to make mistakes. Just now, Target 3 picked up his phone. From where he was on the old water tower, Sanders radioed. In an hour, the 4th call. Sam followed the restless pace of the bikers. They are aware of a problem. They simply do not yet know what it is. From his monitoring position, Matthews added, I got movement at the clubhouse. Everyone is being called in by Vipers. Gathering of the entire membership. Frustrated, Dominic Salvatore slammed a laptop shut at the Crimson Reapers clubhouse. They had received few droplets of protection money. Companies are making justifications and showing courage all of a sudden. Even worse, their suppliers were complaining of mysteriously disrupted shipping channels. Blaze insisted that someone was working against us. Perhaps the Gulf Cartel or the Italians. Vipers scoffed in Shadow Ridge, yet his voice was tinged with skepticism. We own this land. Nobody would venture. Master? In popped a potential. I just received word. Our Carson Valley storage facility was attacked by police. It's all gone. Hammer calculated that's 3 supply lines in 2 days. This isn't arbitrary. Detective Romano went over Sam Harper's extensively redacted military file in the police station. His sniper records were renowned, yet the most of his 20 years of duty remained classified. Officer Turner interrupted her research. Investigator. Another food drive is being held by Sister Eleanor. Even if Crimson Reapers are observing, something seems off. They are not going to move in. The food drive at St. Catherine's went smoothly and quietly. While Sam's team conducted covert monitoring, Sister Eleanor oversaw volunteers. Families from the area moved in and out, shielded by vigilant eyes they never saw. As Sam assisted with moving goods, Sister Eleanor remarked, "Your brother's men are very good. Mr. Sanders is the only person I've seen twice." Sam nearly grinned. Hearing that will disappoint him. It was once 1, not 2. The Crimson Reapers are also observing, hesitant to approach. Excellent. Fear is an effective teacher. As the food drive came to an end, Detective Romano arrived. She observed the covert security, the 2 slick civilian movements, and the 2 tactical placements for volunteers. What an operation, she noted, Sister Eleanor. Nearly expert. Detective, God offers protection in various ways. Similar to your brother. What isn't classified about his service record is impressive. There are high-ranking friends of the Crimson Reapers. Things might turn ugly. It's ugly already, Sister Eleanor said. You have witnessed the damage they have caused to our community. Viper got another unsettling report across town. The person who collected their protection payment has vanished. Outside a closed gas station, they discovered his bike, undamaged. Blaze insisted that this was a message. We must strike back. The church should come first. No, the table was struck by Viper's fist. We are shrewd. Make a call to our station buddies. Get me all of Sam Harper's information. Everybody has areas of stress. Boss, I've already tried. Police databases were locked. System maintenance of some sort. Sam's cell rang. Johnson had access to the financial records of the Crimson Reapers. Money trails that lead to unexpected locations imply that their operation was a component of a larger scheme. Johnson texted, I got names. Judges, 2 police commanders, and politicians. This surpasses thugs on the street. When Sister Eleanor saw Detective Romano standing in the final row, she concluded evening prayers. There was conflict on the detective's face. Romano said, "Your brother is good. Without firing a shot, he is ending their operations. Viper, however, has contacts. Federal ones. The files are visible to me. But detective, you're here. Why? Since you're correct. Better is due to this town. I made Sam watch the conversation on the security cameras at the church. Romano has made up her mind. His team was radioed by him. How is our pal doing, Sanders? Still locked. Very communicative after we gave him the rundown on his alternatives. Tonight, Viper is expecting a shipment. Large one. Excellent. It's time to make sure they understand the situation. The Crimson Reapers assembled in large numbers at their clubhouse as darkness fell. 30 bicycles. Complete membership. They are getting ready to accompany their largest shipment of the year. This demonstration of strength was much needed. Sam's squad moved into position, but none of them noticed. They had no idea that their package would never reach them. Contacts at the state line have already intercepted it. They were all unaware that every action they had taken against St. Catherine's had been meticulously recorded. Assembling evidence for federal cases. As the Crimson Reapers rode out in large numbers, the streets of Shadow Ridge were filled with the thunder of motorcycles. The darkness was pierced by their headlights. A display of strength intended to frighten. Sam Harper, however, peered through his scope into the darkness. Target counting. Positions are noted. The Crimson Reapers would start to realize by dawn. They had not only threatened a community service program run by a nun. They had given a Marine sniper enough reason to destroy their whole company. And there had never been a mission that Sam Harper failed. Viper threw a glass on the wall, and the Crimson Reapers clubhouse exploded with commotion. $3 million worth of missing goods. Their year's largest shipment disappeared. For 6 hours, 30 bikers trailed an empty truck while their actual load vanished into thin air. Someone needed to speak. Blaze walked tensely. It must have been an inside job. Hammer insisted that our route was clean. We've operated it for many years. The officers were not looking in the right direction. The Border Patrol. Viper interrupted him, "This isn't police work. This demonstrates military accuracy. Harper is taking action." As Detective Romano went over the financial records Johnson had given him, he discovered more wrongdoing on every page. Through shell corporations, the protection funds of the Crimson Reapers finally made their way to state politicians, judges, and council members. Spreading documents around the desk in the church office, she informed Sister Eleanor that her brother was thorough. 3 years have passed since these payment trails began. Sam slipped in gently, "The money's important. What matters, though, is what they're purchasing. Shadow Ridge has a purpose. They are constructing infrastructure and safeguarding particular transportation routes. For what purpose?" Johnson discovered some intriguing relationships with private military contractors while working on that. 3 Crimson Reapers showed up at Eduardo's grocery store and demanded their weekly payment. However, something had changed. Eduardo straightened up and spoke steadily. "No more," he said plainly. "Leave my store." "Old man, do you really want to do this?" Blaze grabbed for him, then stopped as he saw the characteristic red patch on his chest. Sanders' voice echoed from above, "I really wouldn't." In an attempt to appear tough as they hurried to their motorcycles, the motorcyclists fled. While serving lunch to senior parishioners, Sister Eleanor saw that people were walking more freely and raising their heads. Sitting close by, Detective Romano was formally keeping an eye on a community event. "Your brother's strategies work," Romano said. "Last night, Crimson Reapers lost 2 additional storage facilities. They're becoming desperate. Sister Eleanor warned that desperate men are dangerous men. Sam joined them in disguise as a volunteer, which is why we're moving more quickly. Johnson discovered Viper's true history. He is more than just a gang boss. He has been constructing smuggling routes for a larger entity as a logistics specialist and former private military contractor. What are they smuggling? Romano continued. The political protection, the shell corporations, and these routes are too complex for typical gang activities. Viper received a call from his actual bosses at the clubhouse. He was pallid after their little talk. He ordered shackles, so call everyone. I'm referring to everyone. Every chapter that is within writing reach should be pulled in. Does Harper wish to be a soldier? All right, let's see how he responds to a conflict. Sam's crew kept an eye on heightened gang activity across town. Local motels are crowded with dozens of bikes that are thundering in from nearby cities. According to Matthews, there are 60 new patches. More are coming every hour. Not all of these are Crimson Reapers. They are enlisting supporters from various organizations. From St. Catherine's Steps, Sister Eleanor observed the constant flow of motorcyclists. Their goal is to overwhelm you with figures. Sam clarified that they were attempting to alter the game. Make it too public and messy for our typical strategies. Through Sam's earpiece, Johnson's voice crackled. Sir, he discovered something in the military files of Viper. He worked on classified activities in addition to being a contractor. In an attempt to conceal links, someone has been redacting his file in real time. Detective Romano rushed in, panting a little. I just overheard police conversation. Crimson Reapers invoked all of their resources. Police officers in the area are being told to step aside. Unexpectedly, state police were reassigned. Sam saw that they were establishing a free fire zone, allowing police enforcement to move freely after being cleared. Viper assembled his officers in the clubhouse. Does Harper believe he is pursuing us? All right, let's demonstrate to him what occurs when predators turn into prey. Start with his favorite thing. As Sam's team reported more bikers arriving, darkness descended over Shadow Ridge. The town held its breath. People are rushing home early. As leather-clad figures took over the highways, the streets began to empty. Sister Eleanor heard motorcyclists coming as she completed guarding the church's food bank. Dozens this time, not a handful. Together, they growled like impending thunder. She called her brother, Sam. They're done being subtle, I think. Sam counted approaching bikes with his scope. With patches from 5 different clubs on either side of him, Viper led the column. They surrounded the entrance to St. Catherine in a semicircle. The ancient stone walls are painted in sharp shadows by headlights. Viper's voice rang out, time to remind people what happens when they defy us. Set it on fire. Set everything on fire. However, the motorcyclists' chests started to show laser dots as they advanced. 5, then dozens, then 1. This move was anticipated and planned for by Sam's staff. Would it be sufficient to avert what was about to happen? Motorcycles roared through the streets of Shadow Ridge as 2 forces braced for battle. To put an end to this evening, the Crimson Reapers had numbers, desperation, and orders from above. However, the Marine sniper they were up against had never lost a firefight he chose to engage in. And as soon as they threatened his sister, he had decided on this one. One side would not leave, and the night was set to blow up. More than 60 motorcycles made a semicircle around the door of St. Catherine's Church, which stood silent in the encroaching darkness. The Crimson Reapers held their stance as red laser dots danced across chrome and leather slashes. They were too far gone to turn back now. Viper's voice echoed through the church grounds, last chance, Harper. Do you really want to go to your sister's church and risk a carnage? Instead, from the steps of the church, Sister Eleanor's voice answered calmly and clearly. Mr. Salvatore, the only bloodshed here will be on your conscience. Viper, still so upright, got off his horse and walked on. You don't really know what you're getting into, do you? This is larger than Shadow Ridge and your tiny food bank. As Viper advanced, Sam saw through his scope his tactical spacing and the way he employed his men for cover. This was no typical leader of a gang. Every motion was a reflection of his military training. Sanders radioed from his position that he was correct about one thing. These are not merely reinforcements for gangs. Some of these guys have a contractor history, military experience, or professional mobility. Detective Romano's badge was on full display as her car crept slowly through the crowd of bikers. With purposeful composure, she pulled out and parked between the church and the group. I still have jurisdiction over this, she declared. This is not the appropriate method to deal with any resentment you may feel. Your jurisdiction? Blaze chuckled. Detective, look around. Do you honestly believe that badge will have any significance tonight? The badge may not. Eduardo came out of the darkness, shotgun in hand, and his voice carried. Other residents of the community showed there, including teachers, retailers, and regular individuals with hunting rifles and a strong will. However, this is our town. Viper's cell rang. His expression darkened as he checked the message. He called to Sam, "You have surveillance on the church. We have a better idea." He saw a live feed from St. Catherine's Youth Center across town on his phone. It had already been broken by Crimson Reapers, who occupied the kitchen and classrooms where Sister Eleanor provided daily meals to needy youngsters. Viper's voice now carried contentment. "Let's talk about your troops leaving Shadow Ridge." "You're thinking that's my only team," Sam said, his voice suddenly rising above the shadows. "Take another look at your video." The youth center feed changed, revealing Johnson's second team methodically disarming and zip-tying Crimson Reapers. Sam was ready for this move, had expected it. "I can't do that," Viper growled. "All of your men are here, according to our police scanner." Was it truly your expectation that a Marine sniper would give you the location of all his pieces? There was a trace of pride in Sister Eleanor's voice. "Mr. Salvatore, my brother defends the defenseless. He has always done so." The defenseless? There was real amusement in Viper's laugh. "You don't know what's going on in Shadow Ridge, do you? Why are we here at all? Harper, tell her. Inform her about the monthly military convoys that go through. Under agricultural shipping, the actual cargo is concealed." As tension increased, Sam's squad maintained their focus. They could see additional individuals stepping out of the darkness through their scopes. Men in tactical gear, moving with expert precision, but not gang members. Detective Romano concluded they were private military contractors. The gangs are merely a front for something more significant. Much larger, Viper said. There is more to Shadow Ridge than meets the eye. It is a well-chosen transit hub. The group. Rackets for protection. They are all merely diversions from the actual operation. Now Sam's voice was clear: human trafficking. Johnson discovered that in your files. You're not merely carrying weapons or drugs. People are being moved by you. Out of the books. No inquiries were made. The night air was heavy with the discovery. As the full extent of the horror that her town was facing became apparent, Sister Eleanor's hands gripped her rosary more tightly. Highly skilled staff, Viper clarified. Experts. Operators. Individuals who are not formally recognized. Move to the appropriate location. Shadow Ridge is merely a single link in an extensive chain. Sam said, "We're going to break a chain." Once more, Viper's phone buzzed. As he read the message, he grinned. "Harper, no. You will turn to leave. Because this community will be overrun by federal authorities in approximately 30 seconds. Not the arresting sort, though. In the sense of tidying up loose ends. The first black SUVs arrived at town limits, and motorcycle motors screamed to life. Though not in retreat, the shadow horsemen were retreating. For something worse, they were preparing the field. Sam. As Sister Eleanor observed the gang retreating, her voice was filled with worry. "What's next?" Sam responded, already organizing his team's counterattack, the real enemy. Viper and his group were only the tip of the iceberg. We now get to meet the people they actually serve. Unmarked cars started to drive through Shadow Ridge in exact lines, and the streets grew empty. There had been danger from the gang. However, the night was far from done, and these men, professionals schooled in problem-solving, represented something considerably more terrifying. And the actual struggle for Shadow Ridge was just around the corner. Shadow Ridge was traversed by black SUVs with military accuracy. Their residents used night vision and thermal imaging technology to survey the streets. Federal agents were not involved. They were housekeepers. Professionals with expertise in problem-solving. Sanders stated from his location that he counted 12 trucks and 3-man teams. They are executing a complete tactical sweep pattern. Through his scope, Sam observed the contractors setting up control stations at significant intersections. They didn't move at random. They were shutting off escape routes and isolating parts of the town. Sam radioed Detective Romano, "Get as many people as you can into the church. Sister Eleanor is familiar with the ancient tunnel system." Romano said, "I'm already on it," and led the villagers to St. Catherine's doors. However, we have still another issue. The station just sent word. It has been directed that Chief Wilson lock down every officer. High-ups are concealing this. Sister Eleanor led families down the basement of St. Catherine's, where emergency exits were located in the former maintenance tunnels. Bringing supplies, Eduardo and other shop owners were ready for what could be a long night. "The old mill is in the tunnel past the boiler room," she told Romano. "People can get to the highway from there. Do you genuinely believe that evacuation will be necessary?" As he assisted an elderly couple in descending the stairs, Romano inquired. "Detective, these men aren't here to make arrests. Their purpose is to maintain silence." Sam's team stood outside and watched the contractor's systematic search. Unlike the Crimson Reapers, these were not thugs. They covered angles, remained disciplined, and moved like special troops. Johnson's voice was urgent, "Sir. More of Viper's data have been decrypted. It's not simply human trafficking here. Old mining tunnels that lead to military sites are the foundation of Shadow Ridge. They are transporting more than only people, weapons, confidential technology, and unofficially created items." Sam knew that's why they picked this place. Corrupt bureaucrats, underground channels, and the ideal gang cover narrative. With their firearms at the ready, a group of contractors came to Eduardo's store. However, local police vehicles blocked both ends of the street with bright lights before they could break in. "Officer Turner is here." Mike didn't fully sense the authority in his voice. "We still have jurisdiction over this." The leader of the contractor crew grinned icily. "Officer, check your orders. Currently, this is a federal operation." "Funny," Turner said. "Shadow Ridge Police is what my badge reads. That means something unless Chief Wilson says differently." Additional police units showed up to join Turner's stance. Despite their lack of military experience, they were familiar with their town and had sided with them. Viper got new orders via encrypted lines inside the Crimson Reapers clubhouse. Authorized clean sweep with no witnesses. The entire town. Blaze appeared uneasy as well. Thousands of people, that is. Viper got on his bike and said, "That's why we're leaving. Leave it to the experts." However, the Crimson Reapers' escape routes were barred as they got ready to leave. This was something that Sam's team had foreseen and had positioned resources to contain. "Salvatore, are you already running?" They could hear Sam's voice over their radio channel. "I assumed you were an expert." "College, you don't realize how big this is," Viper said. "This route and these tunnels are worth more than the entire town. Do you truly believe that they will allow you to reveal it? They are no longer free to choose." Johnson pressed a button when Sam gave him a nod. Cell phones rang with emergency alerts all across Shadow Ridge. Local and national news stations were inundated with documents, photographs, money records, and proof of the entire operation. Sam explained that it was a dead man's switch. Either everyone leaves, or the truth is revealed. The chiefs of the contractor teams hurriedly conferred after receiving unexpected additional orders. The stakes had shifted. It was impossible to contain. Watching through his scope, Sanders cautioned, "They're calling our bluff." "No," Sam clarified. "They're figuring out losses. Is the publicity for Shadow Ridge worth it?" Sister Eleanor heard footsteps coming as she guided an old man down the basement passages inside St. Catherine's. When Officer Turner showed up, Detective Romano dropped her weapon. According to Turner, all troops were instructed by Chief Wilson to protect people. "We might as well make it count if we're going to lose our jobs," he argues. The contractor teams started moving more forcefully above ground. They had alternative strategies, but they couldn't risk using full military tactics in a community in America. Gas leaks, accidents, and other events that could account for large numbers of mortality. Sister Eleanor's voice could be heard over his radio, "Sam. These folks are depending on us for whatever you have planned." Sam saw more contractor units take their places, "And I know, sister. We're not merely revealing their operation because of this. We're going to accept it." Tension rose in the night air as both sides readied themselves for the next move. To start over, the contractors had instructions, tools, and training. However, they had to contend with a Marine sniper defending family, a detective who had rediscovered her morals, and a community that would not go away in silence. Shadow Ridge was going to discover why some secrets are kept hidden and how revealing them can have a profound impact. Sector after sector, Shadow Ridge's electricity grid fell dark in a planned blackout that only left backup generators running. The contractors' tactical advantage changed in the unexpected darkness. They now had recognizable infrared signatures from their night vision equipment. Sanders said there were 4 teams heading toward the church. "They're dispersing in an effort to keep coverage." Sam said, observing through heat optics, "Let them spread thin." "How's our timeline going, Johnson?" The initial round of files was sent to the national media. They are inquiring about missing people close to transportation routes and classified shipments. Already, 3 senators have demanded inquiries. In the evidence room of the police station, Detective Romano worked rapidly, transferring files before they were inadvertently erased. This must be seen by Chief Wilson. Signs of transport date back 3 years. Our community is being used as a black site waypoint by military contractors. Wilson, read the documents. More than that. 6 further towns are connected by these routes. In a larger network, Shadow Ridge is but one hub. St. Sister Eleanor coordinated the town's residents to take refuge in the basement at Catherine's. Her crisis management talents, developed over years of managing community initiatives, suddenly found a new use. She told Officer Turner that the storm drainage system is connected to the tunnels beyond the old chapel. "We can relocate individuals in groups of 20 if we have to evacuate." A young mother holding her toddler, sister, raised her voice. "The contractors are obstructing my son's medication and the hospital." Sister Eleanor called, "Eduardo. The medical supplies in your store. Are you able to contact them?" Eduardo nodded. "The loading dock tunnels are connected to the back entrance. However, the Crimson Reapers are familiar with those paths. There are issues for the Crimson Reapers as well." They heard Sam's voice on their radio. He peered through his scope at the contractor teams encircling the gang's clubhouse. Viper encountered increasing opposition within the clubhouse. Blaze contended that these aren't adversaries we can threaten or police officers we can buy off. They'll bury us all, these guys. Viper maintained that our bosses had pledged protection. But there was no conviction in his speech. Your bosses just attempted to break off communication. Hammer displayed a phone with blocked channels on it. We are the first to be cleaned out. Sam's group watched as the solidarity of the Crimson Reapers started to break down. A few members disappeared into the shadows. Others made the case for negotiating with the contractors. The criminal organization that had plagued Shadow Ridge was disintegrating. Sanders radioed in a hurry, "Sir. Something is being deployed at the electricity substations by contractor teams. They appear to be explosive charges." Romano recognized they were about to set off a chain reaction of infrastructure breakdown. Make it all seem like a terrible mishap. However, Sam had foreseen this. Phase 2 is started by Johnson. Every working telephone, radio, and television in Shadow Ridge started to broadcast emergency alarms. These days, there is more than just evidence, evacuation orders and emergency response procedures. Official records of their attendance were undermining the contractor's accident story. According to Johnson, National Guard units are mobilizing. Helicopters from the media arrive. They can no longer control this, there are too many eyes. New directives were given to the contractor teams. Their prior accuracy giving way to haste. Instead of hours, they had minutes to finish their mission or retreat. Sam cautioned that they would first target hard targets. The police station, a church, or any other location where evidence may be kept. Sister Eleanor decided after hearing the cars approaching. Get your medical supplies, Eduardo. Coordinate with Chief Wilson, Officer Turner. Detective Romano. On it already. Romano was transferring data to safe servers. But you must leave, sister. One of the main targets is you. Detective, this is my church. I won't run my town. Sam's crew confronted the first contractor unit outside the church that was trying to break in. Not by direct fire. Professionals were up against other professionals. It was a war of timing, position, and information management. Sanders said several cars were coming from the east. Not FBI rapid response teams, government plates, or contractors. Sam cautioned, they're not here to help. Not quite yet. Containment units are attempting to manage the story. As federal officials arrived on the scene, emotions escalated once again. On Shadow Ridge, three forces now came together. Contractors who are attempting to conceal the truth. Agents are attempting to manage it. And Sam's group is battling to make it public. Viper made his choice among the confusion. He radioed, Harper said. You need to know something about those tunnels you discovered. They're actually defending something. Explosive devices exploded at strategic locations throughout the town, cutting short the reveal. However, the contractors realized that their charges had been identified and disarmed, rather than causing a cascade of infrastructure collapse. Swapped out for the surveillance equipment used by Sam's crew. Sam transmitted on all frequencies, so check your phones. All of the charges that you just initiated were captured, logged, and uploaded. There is no darkness at Shadow Ridge. Not this evening. As government vehicles and media helicopters loomed in the distance, the contractor teams had to make a crucial choice. They had failed in their task. How many levels of secrecy would be revealed before it was over was the only question. But the real fight of the night was only getting started in the shadows of Shadow Ridge, lit by emergency lights and helicopters. Once revealed, some secrets take on a life of their own. Like raptors, media helicopters circled Shadow Ridge. Three distinct forces moved through the streets, their flashlights piercing the night. The contractors had disappeared, leaving their cars behind for more covert activity. More concerned with information management than life preservation, FBI containment squads set up perimeters. Viper's voice crackled over the secret channel, Harper. The underground tunnel system. It's not limited to transportation. Down there is a facility. For years, they have been transporting both people and equipment through this area. What sort of establishment? As contractor workers regrouped close to the former mining entrance, Sam saw through his scope. Testing location. Not legal medical research, though. They required inaccessible infrastructure in distant areas. They choose places like Shadow Ridge for this reason. Local gangs offer protection. Corrupt officials turn a blind eye. Sister Eleanor heard the conversation over the radio in St. Catherine's basement. She became aware of the missing persons reports. Homeless and drifting for the past 3 years. Ideal subjects for tests. Detective Romano bitterly concluded. No relatives, no contacts, and no one to question. Sanders radioed in a hurry, "Sir. The FBI is installing signal jammers. They are attempting to dominate the narrative and obstruct media communications." Sam's group was ready for this. Johnson turned on backup transmitters so that national news channels could continue to receive their evidence stream. Shadow Ridge's truth was getting out of control too quickly. Federal agents confronted Chief Wilson at the police station and demanded that he resign. Now, this is a national security issue. Their boss demanded. This has to do with human dignity. Wilson shot back. Observing his officers as they distribute and copy evidence. That surpasses your clearance level, as far as I can tell. The contractor teams started acting more forcefully. No longer worried about keeping shelter. They had only a few minutes to finish their objective before things got out of control. Sanders said there were several counts of breach. They are targeting communication centers, electrical substations, and vital infrastructure. Sam said, "Let them waste time on the obvious targets." "How is our backup power holding up, Johnson?" "All important locations have emergency generators operating. However, these contractor teams aren't merely come to tidy up, sir. They're aiming toward a particular goal." This was confirmed by Viper's voice. "The building. It must fail safely. They will bury it if they are unable to protect it. Within half a mile, everything and everyone goes dark." Through their backup radio network, Sister Eleanor coordinated with other emergency shelters to arrange citizens in the church basement. After living in terror of the Crimson Reapers, the town now collaborates with practiced efficiency. The hospital was reached by Eduardo's squad. According to her, medical supplies are being given out, but the contractors are going to face more significant issues soon. Sam reassured her. Since their arrival, his team has been preparing for this very situation by creating the foundation. Suddenly, the FBI containment unit located their cars. EMP devices were targeted by malfunctioning electronics. Hours before, Sam's team had planted. The federal agents were seen leaving their lifeless cars by media aircraft. Their attempt at situational control has backfired miserably. All frequencies were transmitted by Harper, a contractor team leader. "You don't know what you're revealing. This is the job that is being done. The security of the country depends on it. Human experimentation is essential." Romano, the detective, broke in. "Abducting Americans for unlawful medical examinations. Sacrifice is sometimes necessary for progress," the contractor said icily. "You forced our hand now, though. In 10 minutes, the failsafe is engaged. Everyone inside the confined area is included in the cover article." As the contractor teams started to converge on the former mining entrance, Sam saw through his scope. "This failsafe, Viper. How does it get started?" "Lowest level, central control room. However, they must first clear the tunnels. No one is more familiar with those passages than my men. We're in this predicament because of your soldiers." Sam reminded him. "Perhaps. They are, however, your greatest option at the moment to get to that control room ahead of the contractors. When state police and authorized federal response units finally started to arrive, the sirens of incoming vehicles reverberated through the streets of Shadow Ridge. The window of opportunity for the contractor was rapidly closing. Sister Eleanor's voice was urgent. "Sam. The people they have harmed and the lives they have wrecked, no matter what they are trying to safeguard in that institution, cannot remain buried. Sam has already coordinated with his team and guaranteed that it won't. Keep overwatch, Sanders. Get me all the information about the tunnel system's layout, Johnson." Detective Romano. "I'm on the go," she said. "With us are local SWATs. When federal authorities threaten their village, they don't like it." As several forces readied themselves to converge on the concealed site, the night air hummed with anxiety. The contractors were desperate and well-trained. The FBI was confused and had power. The Crimson Reapers knew the area and had a natural knack for survival. Sam Harper, however, possessed something more valuable. A well-defined goal and the ability to accomplish it. Sniper rifles and breaching charges aren't always the most lethal weapons. At times, it's the unwavering conviction that you're standing up for what's right. The underground struggle for Shadow Ridge was about to begin. Into the dark, where awful truths awaited revelation and secrets festered. But first, a Marine sharpshooter who had vowed to defend his sister's community would have to hear those secrets. Additionally, Sam Harper never broke his word. Footsteps reverberated through the shadows as Sam's squad made their way through the abandoned mining tunnels beneath Shadow Ridge. Even though Sam still harbored mistrust, Viper took the lead because of his extensive local knowledge. Infrared markings were used to mark their route by Crimson Reapers who had volunteered to assist behind them. Clear through tactical gear, yet invisible to the unaided eye. Viper said quietly, "The main research level is 3 floors down." They never imagined having to defend against individuals who were familiar with the maintenance shafts, even if there were security checkpoints every 100 yards. "What is the number of citizens detained?" Sam's tone was tense with restrained rage. "I'm not sure of the precise quantity, they relocate them in tiny groups at night. Some return, while others do not." As authorized federal response units arrived, Sister Eleanor worked with Detective Romano above ground. The FBI containment teams had to switch from stifling information to limiting damage as a result of the media presence. "Witnesses are coming forward," Romano said. After 3 years of evidence, people who lost family members were unable to fully conceal the weird cars they witnessed. The timeframe of the contractor. As volunteers continued to evacuate civilians from the possible bomb radius, Sister Eleanor posed the question. "Sam's team has to use their security forces to get to the control room before they can activate their failsafe, which is 8 minutes away. Below ground." The first indications of the actual nature of the facility appeared. Medical equipment was visible through reinforced windows, and modern security doors had been erected in the former mine tunnels. "Johnson, how are the electricity systems at the site doing?" Sam radioed. "Operating on internal generators, yet these readings are consuming a significant amount of electricity, sir. There's more to what they're doing down here than basic medical research." Ahead, the first contractor crew emerged, navigating the tunnel intersection strategically. Professional operators swept the area with trained precision while Sam's crew and the Crimson Reapers sought shelter. A 4-person group. At the tunnel entrance, Sanders reported from his overwatch position. "From the south passage comes another unit. They're making a strong drive for the control room." Their communications carried the voice of Sister Eleanor. Several unmarked helicopters are reportedly arriving, according to Sam from Shadow Ridge Memorial. They are using backup exits to evacuate someone or something from the building. VIP extraction. Viper attested. Most likely, project managers and research personnel. People who are too knowledgeable to take a chance on. As more contractor teams gathered on their position, Sam observed through his tactical sight. These were no longer merely cleaners. Protecting whatever secrets were hidden deeper within the facility was the responsibility of these special operatives. Johnson cautioned, "Fail-safe in 5 minutes." As contractors engaged their position, gunfire erupted throughout the tunnel. Every move made by Sam's crew demonstrated their military training and honed precision. The Crimson Reapers flanked the expert operators with maintenance shafts because they were familiar with the underground system. As the firefight grew more intense, Sam knew they weren't attempting to halt us. "We're being delayed by them. Purchasing time for another purpose." Through their communications, Detective Romano's voice cracked. "We discovered something in the police files, Sam, shipments departing the establishment. Despite being labeled as medical waste, the disposal procedures." Viper interrupted, "They're destroying evidence. Everything, including test subjects, that they are unable to evacuate is burned." The realization was a shock. These were more than just dishonest public servants and illegal businesses. Beneath national security classifications and bureaucratic paperwork, this was systematic evil. As they advanced forward into the building, Johnson gave an update after 3 minutes. Checkpoints for security revealed evidence of a hurried exodus. Equipment is broken, computers are erased, and files are destroyed. A shadow rider pointed to a thick security door and cried out, "Sir." This one was still powered and sealed, unlike the others. They could see monitoring systems, restraint seats, and medical equipment through the window. "This is where they brought them," Viper said with real anguish in his voice. "Those who vanished and those who never returned." Using helmet cameras, Sam's team broke into the room and recorded everything. This time, it was impossible to dismiss the data as urban legends or conspiracy theories. Johnson cautioned, "Fail-safe in 2 minutes. There is a lot of security in the control room, which is 1 floor below." Sister Eleanor made sure that civilians were out of the blast radius by coordinating with above-ground rescue services. However, when she radioed her brother, her voice was piercing. "Sam, these individuals must take responsibility for their actions here. Not only the contractors. Everyone who was aware yet said nothing." As backup generators kicked in, the lights in the complex flickered. Sam's crew was able to observe contractor soldiers gathering near the control room by using their tactical feeds. Elite operatives bought time for their superiors to flee with their secrets by preparing for a final stand. "1 minute," Johnson said. "It's not just an explosion, sir, whatever they're preparing. The equipment we've seen and these power readings will do worse things." As more contractor teams approached to halt their advance, Sam watched. Professionals, these men would sacrifice their lives to safeguard their mission. However, their opponents fought for something more powerful than money or commands. Truth, justice, and the basic human dignity that so many had been denied by their facility. The conflict over Shadow Ridge had descended into the dark, where horrible secrets smoldered. However, truth always finds a way to shine through the gloom. And that light was going to be Sam Harper. Sam's squad was pushing for the control room with 45 seconds left. Gunfire reverberated through the facility's hallways as contractor teams engaged in combat with the frantic accuracy of men who knew that defeat was not an option. The Crimson Reapers demonstrated their value by outflanking skilled operators who had never thoroughly mapped the secrets of the tunnel system using maintenance shafts. 30 seconds. Johnson spoke with a sense of intensity. Ahead is the control room. Substantial reinforcement. There is something there that they would sacrifice their lives for. Sister Eleanor discovered what they had been lacking above ground. Buried among decades of church records in St. Catherine's archives, she learned the reason Shadow Ridge had been selected. She radioed Sam to the mining business. They discovered something in these tunnels in 1962. Something the government classified right away. This facility wasn't built here by accident. Viper reloaded behind cover and said, "Makes sense. The ideal cover narrative. Abandoned mines. Tiny town. Corrupt public servants. Who would give it a second glance? While authorized federal response units arrived, Detective Romano worked with state police. The agencies who surrounding the FBI containment teams genuinely cared about justice. 20 seconds, Johnson said. Despite the most opposition to date, Sam's crew managed to breach the last corridor. Not all of them were contractors. These operators were exceptional. Men with years of experience in black operations and military backgrounds. Sister Eleanor's voice broke through the confusion. Sam, records from the church. They said that in the 1960s, medical equipment was brought in. For more than half a century, they have been conducting human experiments. A dying contractor groaned farther away, his combat gear smeared with blood. Shadow Ridge. Ground for testing. Creating something. They are powerless. 10 seconds. Ahead was the door to the control room. Steel that has been reinforced to resist military-grade explosives. However, there was one last surprise for the Crimson Reapers. A shaft for maintenance that went around the main entrance. 5 seconds. Sam's group broke in from several directions. Combat broke out in close quarters in the control room. Desperate need collides with years of professional expertise. Countdown sequences appeared on computer screens. Evidence is buried behind tons of rock using fail-safe procedures. 3 seconds. Standing at the main console with his finger hovering over the last command was the facility's lead contractor. "You don't get it," he growled. "Here, what we accomplished was essential. For the benefit of all." 2 seconds. Sister Eleanor's voice was audible over their communications. "Truth is the only greater good." Exposed. 1. Sam made a flawless shot. A one pivotal moment distilled years of sniper training. Before his finger could finish the process, the contractor fell. With his fingers fluttering over keys, Johnson arrived at the console and ended the fail-safe procedure. As they looked around the control room, however, the victory seemed hollow. Monitors revealed testing rooms, medical labs, and areas where innocent individuals had endured for the sake of secret advancement. Hidden beneath a sleepy community that was unaware of the horror festering beneath its streets were decades of covert experiments. Detective Romano watched over their tactical feeds and muttered, "My God. How many individuals did they?" There were too many, and there was real regret in Viper's voice. "We believed that we were merely operating protection rackets. Never inquired as to what we were actually safeguarding." As authorized federal agents started to secure the location, the lights within the facility were turned on to emergency power. Teams of investigators would spend weeks recording the events that transpired in these tunnels. Families would at last find out what happened to their loved ones who went missing. The long-hidden truth would finally come to light. Sister Eleanor cried out to Sam from above. Similar facilities in other locations are being reported by the media. Shadow Ridge was the first to be disclosed, but it wasn't the only one. With fresh insight, the Crimson Reapers who had assisted them surveyed their surroundings. Yes, they had committed crimes, but even they had boundaries they would not cross. The real monsters had official credentials and were dressed in suits. Johnson reported looking over the databases at the facility, "Sir. They were attempting to improve human capabilities by testing experimental treatments." The topics were people. Sam interrupted him. "Keep it in mind. In those files, each statistic represented a member of a family." Level by level, Detective Romano worked with federal evidence teams to secure the building. The contractors who made it out alive were arrested. They are no longer shielded from justice by their classified status. According to Sister Eleanor, the town is asking questions. They want to know how we allowed this to happen and how it happened. Sam retorted, "We didn't let it happen," as he observed federal officers being guided into the tunnel system by Crimson Reapers. "We made it public. Sometimes turning darkness into light is the most significant accomplishment. One thing, however, became evident as emergency personnel started to process the building, as the media covered decades of classified atrocities, and as Shadow Ridge grappled with what had transpired under its streets. Gunfire is not always the conclusion of a war. Courtrooms are still the scene of some battles. In news articles. In the irresistible but steady march toward justice. Something much deeper had been revealed by the night that started with gang members threatening a church. However, it had also demonstrated how a community might come together. How adversaries can turn into allies. How decades of skillfully constructed lies could be defeated by the truth. Never again would Shadow Ridge be the same. But perhaps, just possibly, it might be better. Federal evidence teams flooded the underground complex as dawn came over Shadow Ridge. The mayhem of the night had given way to the meticulous recording of atrocities that had been kept secret for decades. Sister Eleanor established a command center at St. Catherine's Church for families looking for information about loved ones who have gone missing. Detective Romano laid files on the desk in the church office and said, "So far, we have identified 28 victims, going all the way back to 1985. However, the earlier records were purposefully left unfinished," Sam concluded. His crew collaborated with federal agents, who used evidence collection equipment in place of their combat gear. To make it more difficult to track down, they kept some files analog. The streets of Shadow Ridge were congested by outside media vans. A new form of invasion confronted the village that had once been terrified of the Crimson Reapers. Reporters eager to learn more about the facility's sinister secrets. The contractors. As she assisted a tearful woman in completing a missing persons report, Sister Eleanor inquired. Romano verified that the majority are in jail. But the people in charge, the ones who issued the directives? High-level government contacts are already protecting them. Chief Wilson coordinated with state officials in the police station. His department's wrongdoing was coming to light. Officers who accepted bribes to turn a blind eye are now being held accountable. Johnson called from the room where the evidence was processed. "Sir. Something was discovered in their personnel files. The medical professionals that worked here have connections to other research facilities. Private sector testing and military contracts." Sam realized this was not an isolated incident. Shadow Ridge was a component of a larger whole. The clubhouse of the Crimson Reapers was now a command post for the FBI. Viper and his colleagues gave thorough explanations of their roles in the facility's defense. Exchanging information in order to be taken into account for their potential prosecution. Blaze's typical bluster gave way to actual dread as he insisted, "Never knew what was really happening down there. We assumed we were merely conducting standard gang operations, such as protection rackets." Romano pressed, "But you suspected. The vanished persons, the strange shipments." "We didn't inquire," Viper acknowledged. "Because we didn't want to know, we are also guilty." Through her diligent efforts, Sister Eleanor transformed her church into a haven for people experiencing a different sort of pain. Families who had been looking for answers for years suddenly found out what had happened to their loved ones. While some experienced relief, others endured much more agony. "My brother was the subject of their experiment," an old man sobbed while holding facility records. "He was down there for 5 years while we were looking. Every hour, Sam's team found additional proof. Disjointed documents, unapproved medical testing, augmentation techniques, and trials that went beyond all ethical bounds revealed the facility's genuine intent. According to Johnson, who was examining retrieved data, they were attempting to develop something. Testing unapproved remedies on reluctant subjects, procedures that wouldn't pass any ethical assessment." Romano said that Shadow Ridge offered ideal cover. People are kept in fear by a criminal group, crooked government, and a small village. Who would pay too much attention? Eduardo and other business owners testified outside the police station about being intimidated by the Crimson Reapers for years. However, their tales had evolved. Stories of straightforward gang extortion have given way to fragments of a more extensive plot. Eduardo told federal investigators, "They threatened us to keep us silent." But not only regarding their typical illegal actions. They made sure we never inquired about the unusual noises coming from the old mines or the vehicles that arrived at night. While federal authorities processed the evidence below, Sister Eleanor discovered Sam in the church bell tower. Quietly, she said, "The families deserve justice. They'll learn the truth," Sam said. Justice is a more complex matter. The individuals behind this possess connections and authority. After that, we ensure that the truth is too significant to ignore. There was steel in Sister Eleanor's voice. Every piece of evidence and every victim's narrative are revealed. As Shadow Ridge tried to comprehend what had been discovered, the day dragged on. Overnight, the town has undergone a transformation. Federal trucks and media teams now clog its once quiet streets. However, another modification had also occurred. The fear had vanished, and in its place was a resolve to reveal long-kept secrets. Johnson called quickly, "Sam." Additional files, a secret area within the building, documents dating back to the 1960s, unapproved testing, medical trials, and project leaders' names were discovered. "Make copies," Sam said. "Several safe places. This will never be forgotten." As case files increased hourly, Detective Romano worked with federal prosecutors. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of illicit experimentation, unaccounted for individuals, and pervasive corruption. She cautioned that they would attempt to categorize it. Government secrecy and national security. Sam saw more journalists come in too late. Once they begin to spread, some stories are uncontrollable. On the first day of reckoning for Shadow Ridge, the sun set. Sister Eleanor conducted a prayer session for the victims of the facility at St. Catherine's Church. Sitting next to business owners they had previously intimidated, the Crimson Reapers who had assisted in revealing the truth were bound together by a common dread at what they had unwittingly shielded. One thing, however, became evident as federal teams carried on analyzing the evidence, as families eventually discovered heartbreaking facts, and as Shadow Ridge confronted its most sinister secrets. This was only the start. A thread that would unravel similar activities across the nation had been tugged by the facility's revelation. Something much bigger had been set off by the night that started with gang members threatening a church. And the true struggle, the struggle for truth, justice, and accountability, was only getting started. As the mysteries of Shadow Ridge were revealed to the public, the federal courthouse in Sacramento was a tense place. In front of the grand jury, Detective Romano sat. Her evidence exposed decades of collusion and wrongdoing. Reporters lined the stairs outside, filming every arrival and leave with their cameras. Johnson reported from his surveillance post that there were 3 federal judges. 2 that are directly related to the funding of the facility. From within the system, they are attempting to manipulate the narrative. As additional families came forward, Sister Eleanor collaborated with victim advocate groups in Shadow Ridge. Once a soup kitchen, St. Catherine's basement was now home to an expanding collection of evidence and testimonials. She informed Sam over secure line that another witness had vanished. After leaving his home last night, the former maintenance worker who was responsible for servicing the facility's generators never made it to the FBI safe house. For the 3rd time this week, Sam used his scope to observe unmarked cars circling the church. Anyone who may link the facility to higher authority is being silenced. The leadership of the Crimson Reapers had to face their own challenges. Viper traded decades of experience for consideration while sitting in protective custody. He told federal prosecutors that the contractors were more than just security. These were handlers who made sure we didn't inquire about specific shipments or periods when the facility wasn't open. Additionally, the prosecutor urged local authorities to pay via offshore accounts, political contributions, and shell corporations. The others, the intelligent ones, never knew exactly what they were safeguarding. As she continued her evidence, Detective Romano described years of systematic cover-ups in a steady voice. Reports of missing persons were purposefully handled incorrectly. Important evidence vanished from the prison. Officers who raised concerns were either transferred or the subject of internal affairs inquiries. As witnesses came, Sam's squad kept watch outside the courthouse. They had already foiled 3 assassination attempts. Expert strikes intended to stifle important testimony. Sanders radioed that there were several cars approaching. Professional drivers blacked out windows, following the same pattern as yesterday's attempt. Sam noticed that they were becoming desperate. Careless. The facility's contractors are not the same ones. They quickly hired their second string. Eduardo brought together other business owners in Shadow Ridge, forming a cohesive front against efforts to undermine their testimony. The fear that had prevented them from speaking for years had given way to resolve. "They have deals," Eduardo informed Sister Eleanor. "We have the money to alter our accounts and claim that we were perplexed by what we witnessed, but this time we won't remain silent." The church office had turned into a kind of war room. Maps displayed interconnected facilities throughout the nation, with red strings connecting shadow operations that had concealed themselves behind comparable covers. Small towns scared to raise questions, criminal groups, and corrupt officials. According to Johnson's statistical analysis, the trend is consistently the same. They identify communities that are at risk, set up criminal elements as a front, and employ local corruption to keep things secret. Shadow Ridge was but a component of a bigger scheme. Sister Eleanor looked at the maps. Her face was worried. What is the number of other towns? How many additional families are still in the dark? They're scared of that, Sam said. Not only the secrets of Shadow Ridge, but also the number of comparable operations that could be made public. Breaking news interrupted the courthouse testimony. In Montana, another facility had been made public. The same pattern, decades of missing people, a small community, and criminal cover. Romano said during a recess that it's spreading. Other towns have witnesses coming forward. The entire network is beginning to break down. But the risk grew as more truths were revealed. Attacking anyone who could link the facilities to their real masters, professional hit teams moved with ever-increasing audacity. Coming. The courthouse windows were broken by gunfire when Sanders issued his warning. The assassination crew had given up on tact in favor of hasty action. Sam made an accurate counter-sniper shot, removing the current danger. However, the message was unambiguous. Some would do whatever it took to hide their secrets. Sister Eleanor at Shadow Ridge took the news with dismal resolve. They believe that the truth will be silenced by violence. They're not understanding. The more this news is suppressed, the more quickly it spreads. Testimonies for the day came to a close under strict security. It was impossible to seal the doors that Detective Romano's evidence had opened. Connections that were exposed and extended to the maximum power levels. As federal marshals led her out, she warned that they would attempt to discredit everything. Make us seem like attention seekers and conspiracy theorists. Sam watched as more witnesses showed up and said, "Let them try." Answers were sought by more families. Once they begin to surface, certain realities cannot be hidden. However, one thing became evident as darkness descended over Sacramento: Shadow Ridge's secrets made headlines around the country, and more facilities came to light. Exposing past crimes was only one aspect of the true battle. The goal was to stop them from happening again. About dismantling a system that has unintentionally allowed unimaginable experiments to take place in little villages. Another day of discoveries came to an end. However, there were still secrets in the dark that needed to be brought to light. Professional killers moved with deadly purpose in that darkness. Adamant about keeping the truth quiet before it could proliferate. The conflict that started in a little town church had grown into something far bigger. And whether truth or secrecy won out in the end would be decided throughout the course of the following day. Chaos erupted in Shadow Ridge around midnight as well-planned strikes hit strategic points throughout the community. While court-sealed documents inexplicably caught fire in 3 different places, professional strike teams targeted witness-safe houses. Desperate action had replaced subtlety in the resistance. There have been several breaches recorded. From his Overwatch post, Sanders radioed. They are no longer merely attempting to silence witnesses. Everything associated with the institution is being destroyed. Sister Eleanor at St. Catherine's calmly instructed volunteers who were transferring evidence to safe areas. She had developed crisis management skills over the years of managing community activities. Instead of serving meals, skills are now being employed to safeguard the truth. Just now, the 4th safe house was hit. Detective Romano claimed to have assisted in loading papers into cars that were not marked. However, it's too late. Everything has already been copied and dispersed to several safe places. Despite their lack of practice, Sam's squad evacuated witnesses before the strike teams did. The evidence-turning Crimson Reapers once again demonstrated their value by saving lives by leveraging their familiarity with backstreets and secret paths. They are no longer merely hired guns. Johnson was seen keeping an eye on tactical streams. These striking teams have backgrounds in special operations and the military. Someone has made a serious favor request. As indictments were handed down, federal prosecutors in Sacramento worked through the night. Officials, judges, and business leaders. The facility's security system was disintegrating, and influential individuals had to make difficult decisions. They are betraying one another. As another former official provided proof of immunity, Romano clarified. Everyone is attempting to make agreements before everything falls apart. But there was still one more card for the enemy to play. Electronic incursions struck Shadow Ridge's infrastructure as midnight wore on. The traffic lights weren't working properly. Grids of power flickered. There was unexplained interference with emergency communications. Sam recognized they were attempting to cause havoc. A front for something more significant. Through their tactical network, Sister Eleanor's words could be heard. Controlled but tense. Sam, there's movement on the roof and the church's security system suddenly went out. Sam instructed the protection detail to move in. However, it was too late. As strike teams broke in from several directions, the windows of the church shattered inward. Sister Eleanor stood calmly and dignifiedly in front of the invaders within St. Catherine's. It's too late if you're searching for proof. The facts are previously known. We're not looking for proof. The voice of their boss was one of icy professionalism. Our purpose is to deliver a message. Some tales must remain untold. However, Crimson Reapers emerged from the church's hidden tunnels just as they were about to seize her. Former criminals who had previously plagued the community now fought to keep it safe, outflanking expert operators with their in-depth knowledge of the building's layout. With a newfound sense of purpose, Blaze declared, "Nobody touches the sister. In her own church, no." As the firefight grew more intense, Sam's team arrived. These weren't the facility's desperate contractors. These operators were exceptional. This type of work is exactly what men trained for. However, they encountered adversaries who were battling for truth, atonement, and the soul of their society. "Backup is on the way," Sanders said, observing through his scope as several unmarked vehicles drew closer. Teams of experts in cleanup. They will attempt to sanitize the entire town. As authorized federal response forces mobilized, Detective Romano worked with state police. However, there was a problem. They were redirecting some units. Others were delayed by enigmatic directives from above. "We underestimated the level of corruption," she said. "They are clearing the field through official channels." As the conflict raged above, Sister Eleanor escorted evacuees via old maintenance tunnels inside the chapel. Witnesses and evidence were shielded from contemporary wickedness by the same sections that had once concealed escaped slaves. Johnson's voice was urgent. Sam simply overheard their conversations. Evidence destruction is no longer the only goal here. They intend to undermine everything and paint Shadow Ridge as a community of attention seekers and conspiracy theorists. However, the opposition had made a mistake. Their angry reaction merely confirmed what the witnesses had said. Their frantic efforts to stifle the truth only served to accelerate its dissemination. They continue to believe that force is involved. As she assisted an injured federal agent, Sister Eleanor watched. They're not understanding. They lost their true power as soon as we ceased being terrified. More gunfire broke out during the night as attack teams targeted other targets. However, they discovered missing evidence and deserted buildings everywhere they hit. After years of being terrorized by Shadow Rider, the town had learned how to safeguard its most valuable assets. The treachery followed. A dependable federal prosecutor who had contributed to the case's development abruptly switched sides. Important witnesses had their testimony questioned, their backgrounds revealed, and their credibility assailed. Sam recognized that this had always been their goal. Let's assemble the witnesses, construct the case, and then demolish everything at once. Make everyone appear insane or corrupt. However, something unexpected occurred as Shadow Ridge endured its worst moment, when professional killers roamed its streets and truth itself appeared to be under siege. The town came together. Victimizers and former victims stood together. A group of people who had previously lived in terror found bravery. And in that instant, fear itself, the greatest weapon of the enemy, was permanently rendered ineffective. As Shadow Ridge launched its counterattack, dawn broke over the town. With truth instead of violence. Owners of local businesses welcomed national media. Stories from former victims were shared. Reformed Crimson Reapers even came out into the light, verifying information about the establishment they had previously guarded. Sister Eleanor told reporters assembled at St. Catherine's that they couldn't shut down a whole town. After being intimidated by gang members, the church steps were transformed into a venue for justice. We're all over our fear, and everyone here has a piece of the truth. As more strike teams moved into the area, Sam's team kept an eye on the opposition's moves. However, something had changed. A distinct form of opposition was encountered by the experienced operators. Sanders reported from his position that they are no longer able to move freely. Every street is being watched by locals. Reports are made as soon as a suspicious vehicle is seen. They no longer have a tactical advantage. As further corruption surfaced, Detective Romano collaborated with law-abiding federal agents. 2 supervisors from the FBI were found to have destroyed evidence. A federal marshal was captured on camera taking bribes. Everything the witnesses said was supported by the opposition's own actions. Johnson, monitoring conversations, noted that they were becoming desperate. Leaders of strike teams are doubting directives. Some people are flatly declining missions. The federal prosecutor's treachery backfired catastrophically in Sacramento. His abrupt change of heart and his assaults on witnesses only served to confirm the conspiracy theories. Other communities with comparable amenities started to come forward. According to Romano, it's expanding beyond their control. In the past 12 hours, 3 more facilities have been made public. The same pattern: missing people, small towns, and criminal cover. The Crimson Reapers who had opted for redemption turned out to be quite helpful. As professional hit teams became increasingly irritated, their street knowledge and Sam's tactical expertise kept witnesses safe. As he assisted in evacuating a family before another strike team arrived, Blaze said, "I never imagined we'd be protecting the people we once terrorized. But it feels good, like making things right." The impact of Sister Eleanor extended outside of Shadow Ridge. Witnesses were given asylum by various churches and communities. It was impossible to stop the narrative, discredit it, or bury it. In a rare moment of silence, Sam told his sister, "You were right. People who refuse to remain silent are the strongest weapon against darkness, not force." The opponents, however, had one final desperate move. Documents including criminal histories, private information, and professional misbehavior were made public in an effort to undermine all parties. The defenders of Shadow Ridge discovered their shortcomings and their pasts revealed. Sister Eleanor said, "Let them." Her tone was one of serene assurance. "We simply refuse to allow perfection to be the adversary of right. We are not asserting that we are flawless." At midnight, the situation changed when a strike team commander who had been told to target a witness family instead contacted Sam's squad. He produced records that demonstrated the extent of the scheme and the number of corrupted authorities. He clarified that we enlisted to serve our nation, not to quiet American individuals defending their neighborhoods. It became impossible to disregard Detective Romano's proof. When military investigators arrived, more interested in the truth than in cover-ups, federal oversight committees sought answers. Romano told reporters that they believed it would be effective to destroy our credibility. They were unaware that our imperfections lend credibility to our testimony. "We are presenting the messy, complex truth, not too perfect to believe tales." Similar initiatives were sparked in other places by Shadow Ridge's resistance. Communities who had previously lived in dread started to speak up and demand that their own covert facilities be investigated. Sister Eleanor told national television cameras that it was never about one town. It was about what happens when common people choose community over corruption, right over ease, and truth over fear. The professional assassins of the opposition discovered that their consciences were an unanticipated foe. The wall of secrecy broke from within as more operators declined missions and others came forward with proof. From the bell tower of St. Catherine, Sam observed as Shadow Ridge regained its streets, with citizens organizing security, former victims and perpetrators cooperating, and a community unified against forces that had before been insurmountable. As more witnesses came forward, he informed Romano that they never understood. When a whole town musters the courage to fight, you can't. As the sun set on Shadow Ridge's best hour, skilled operators withdrew, dishonest officials came to light, and the truth broke free from decades of shackles. Powerful individuals would still attempt to conceal their secrets, but Shadow Ridge had demonstrated what was possible when fear was defeated, when a community refused to be hushed, and when common people made the decision to unite against incredible evil. The night that started with gang members threatening a church had evolved into something much more, a model for resistance, a sign of salvation, and a reminder that those who are prepared to stand in the light are the most powerful force against evil. And that light was bursting blaze that had held too long in silence, truth by truth, town after town. Sister Eleanor Harper sat in front of the microphones as the congressional hearing room hummed with anxiety. As Shadow Ridge's secrets made their way to the highest echelons of government, national media outlets carried live coverage. Families of facility victims were seated behind her, their presence was more potent than any testimonies. "Please explain how a church food bank led to the exposure of what may be the largest domestic conspiracy in American history," said Sister Harper, the committee chairperson. "It started with a decision," she said in a firm voice. "The decision to overcome fear and oppose those who exploit it to cover up evil." As other police departments came under investigation, Detective Romano in Shadow Ridge worked with federal investigators. The corruption network that had guarded the facility was coming apart, and other communities were showing similar trends. She informed Sam that 3 additional police chiefs had been detained, they were all connected to local gangs and facilities inside their domains. As important witnesses arrived in Washington, Sam's team kept the area secure. Though their numbers had decreased, professional hit teams continued to function. More operators choose to follow the truth rather than commands, exposing the true mission directors. According to Johnson, Senator Harrison's office recently verified. 6 corporate executives are about to be indicted by grand juries, they are beginning to rise to the top. Viper gave his final testimony at a government facility under security. The former head of the Crimson Reapers disclosed how criminal gangs had been developed especially to serve as a cover for the facilities. He told prosecutors that they had intentionally selected towns with vulnerable people and faltering economies. We were more than simply criminals, we served as their front, their diversion, and their means of preventing others from raising questions. As she went on, Sister Eleanor's story exposed decades of institutionalized wickedness. In addition to harming its victims, the facility corrupted our community as a whole and forced us to remain silent in order to cover it up. The chairman questioned what had changed. We recalled that we were Americans who still believed in justice, not conspirators or victims. During their video-linked testimony at Shadow Ridge, Eduardo and other company owners detailed years of intimidation that concealed more sinister intents. Their tales aligned with comparable reports from other communities, creating an unavoidable pattern. Eduardo clarified the threats and the protection money. It wasn't only gang activity, it was planned and intended to instill terror in order to conceal their true intentions. As more witnesses arrived in Washington, Sam kept an eye on security. The rest of the opposition's operators were becoming careless, their accuracy giving way to despair. In the last week alone, 3 attempts at assassination had failed. From his overwatch position, Sanders noticed that they were disintegrating. Such errors are not made by professional teams. Detective Romano documented how the facility's protection network had permeated several agencies and provided proof of law enforcement wrongdoing. She testified that it wasn't simply the local cops. People from state and federal bureaucracies were everywhere, trying to hide these facilities. In return for their testimony, the Crimson Reapers who had assisted in revealing the truth were given attention. Their decision to stand up for justice had some weight, even though their criminal histories could not be changed. Blaze admitted to the committee that we were mistaken, but we are working to correct the situation. Admitting your involvement in evil can sometimes be the only way to combat it. The hearing chamber fell silent with Sister Eleanor's last words. It wasn't just the facility under Shadow Ridge. Because we refused to recognize it, it was a part of a greater evil that was concealed in plain sight. However, the truth became inexorable once we opened our eyes and refused to turn away. The opposition began its last desperate attacks as more towns came forward, as evidence grew, and as testimonials persisted. Attempts to undermine the congressional investigation, witness intimidation, and media smear operations. But something more powerful than fear or force confronted them. They encountered truth-driven groups and individuals who had triumphed over their darkest moments to advocate for justice. During a pause in testifying, Sam told his sister, "They still don't understand. They believe that this has to do with witnesses and evidence. It has to do with something greater." Sister Eleanor concurred that it's about redemption. It's about deciding to overcome our fears, not just for individuals but for entire communities. As the hearings came to an end, Washington's sun began to set. There would be more testimonials. There would be more proof. More truth would escape the bonds of decades. However, Shadow Ridge had already won its biggest triumph. It had demonstrated to other cities the possibility of resistance, the possibility of redemption, and the power of truth, once expressed, to subvert any plot. After gang members threatened the church, the conflict turned into a national awakening. More witnesses were getting ready to come forward in secure rooms around the nation. More communities were ready to speak up. It was getting brighter. And when people choose to stand in truth, darkness, no matter how deep, cannot endure. Before the sun rose, federal agents moved, planned raids, and hit company headquarters all over the nation. As their empires collapsed, the CEOs who had provided funding for the facilities were forced to face punishment. Recalling how it all started with a simple refusal to be intimidated, Sister Eleanor watched the news in Shadow Ridge with a sense of peaceful contentment. Detective Romano put case files across the desk in the church office and said that 6 large pharmaceutical companies were involved. Their clinical trials and research initiatives were all related to what took place at these sites. What about the political safeguard? As more witnesses showed up for debriefing, Sam inquired while keeping an eye on security feeds. 2 federal judges, 3 senators, and even a governor are being investigated. The entire network is collapsing. Former victims and their families came together for a different sort of healing at St. Catherine's. Sister Eleanor helped people deal with decades of hidden trauma by converting the church basement into a counseling facility. An old mother said, "My son vanished in 1992. He was deemed a runaway by the police. I know now. In one of their experiments, he passed away. I know the truth now, at least." As the remaining operators of the resistance launched their last desperate attacks, Sam's crew remained vigilant. The trained killers were now sloppy with terror after 2 more killing attempts were foiled. Sanders noted from his vantage point that they are employing everybody they can find. Ex-cons, local thugs, and rapidly declining quality. Viper's evidence in Washington revealed the corporate organization that owned the facilities. The former head of the Crimson Reapers described how criminal gangs had been purposefully fostered, managed, and utilized as a front for more sinister activities. The pattern was the same in every community. He told federal prosecutors that in order to keep control, identify groups that are at risk, create criminal components, and instill terror. Ideal disguise for their actual work. As similar operations emerged, Detective Romano collaborated with law enforcement authorities around the country. The network of facilities reached towns in several states, reaching farther than anyone had anticipated. According to Johnson's data analysis, there are also international links. The same techniques, small communities, criminal cover, and dishonest officials are used in research operations in other nations. Beyond Shadow Ridge, Sister Eleanor's Victim Care Network reached out to families and survivors nationwide. Once the target of gang intimidation, the church now represented healing and resistance. She informed a group of recently identified victims that every story counts. Every truth revealed contributes to ensuring that this doesn't occur again. Formal witness protection was granted to the Crimson Reapers who had opted for redemption. Their statements were essential to exposing the wider plot. Helping other towns uncover their own covert facilities gave Blaze and others a sense of purpose. Blaze said, "Sam, it feels weird. I used to scare people to keep secrets. We are now assisting them in revealing those same secrets." Executives had their reckonings in boardrooms around the nation. As unethical practices were exposed, stock prices fell. Programs for research were halted while the matter was investigated. Public attention was drawn to decades of profitable wickedness. As another CEO was escorted away in handcuffs, Romano noted that they were attempting to limit the damage. However, each arrest results in additional links and revelations. At St. Catherine's, Sam's crew stopped a last-ditch effort by the opposition's last operators to stifle the truth. However, they encountered a town that refused to be frightened and a people that had conquered its worries. They have yet to comprehend. As the police escorted the apprehended hit crew away, Sam told his sister, "An entire community that has found its courage cannot be defeated." As additional families came in need of assistance, Sister Eleanor observed. Additional witnesses provided proof. More truth was released from long-held bonds. "This is the true triumph," she whispered softly. Helping individuals recover from evil is just as important as exposing it. Demonstrating to them that they are no longer alone. As further arrests were reported on national television, the sun sank on Shadow Ridge. Politicians, business executives, and dishonest public servants are all being held accountable for their involvement in the plot. However, something more significant was taking place at St. Catherine's Church, the starting point of it all. Voices were emerging for those who had lived in dread. A shattered community was repairing itself. When the truth was told, it broke the bonds that had been held in silence for too long. The conflict, which started when gang members threatened a church, had spread across the country. And, motivated by Shadow Ridge's example, additional towns around the nation were ready to reveal their own secret crimes. Arrests and indictments aren't always a good indicator of success. They are evaluated based on their ability to heal, their bravery, and their decision to unite against evil. And once such a triumph is attained, it cannot be undone. As Sister Eleanor Harper stepped up to the platform, the UN Human Rights Council chamber fell silent. Leaning forward, representatives from 30 different countries observed the elderly nun who had ignited a worldwide awakening. Families of victims from 12 different nations sat behind her, their presence serving as evidence of a global evil. With quiet authority, she started, the facility beneath Shadow Ridge was not unique. Communities all across the world experienced what transpired in our town. Different cultures and languages, but the same pattern of fear and corruption. As the evidence grew, Detective Romano connected with international law enforcement at Interpol's Lyon headquarters. Each activity was concealed behind meticulously crafted criminal fronts, and the network of facilities spanned continents. She told the gathered detectives that the blueprint was the same everywhere. Locate communities that are at risk, set up criminal elements as a front, and bribe local authorities. Shadow Ridge served as a model that was imitated all around the world, not just one story. Working with former Special Forces operators from other countries, Sam's squad had grown. The surviving assassination teams of the opposition were being pursued by experts who were familiar with all of their strategies. Sanders revealed from his new International Command Center that 4 more attempts had been stopped in the last week. 1 each in Thailand, Brazil, and Germany. There aren't enough hiding spots left. As law enforcement discovered similar criminal operations around the world, the Crimson Reaper's experience proved crucial. International gangs had been purposefully fostered as a cover, as Viper's evidence helped reveal. He told Interpol officials each group believed they were on their own. However, they all followed the same pattern, got the same support, and had the same goal: to keep people scared and prevent them from inquiring about what was going on in their cities. Sister Eleanor's global support system brought together survivors from all walks of life. Around the world, churches, temples, and mosques were adopting St. Catherine's approach of communal healing. Evil may have sophisticated methods, she warned the UN Assembly. However, the healing techniques are universal. Truth becomes unstoppable when people band together and refuse to let fear silence them. Executives have their own reckonings in company offices in Asia and Europe. Leaders of pharmaceutical companies who had provided funding for the facility's illicit research were the target of international arrest warrants. Johnson stated that the world's stock markets are reacting and keeping an eye on financial data. The value of 6 significant corporations has dropped by more than 40%. They are auditing all of their research initiatives. As evidence revealed political protection networks, Detective Romano collaborated with Europol. The dishonest authorities who had protected the facilities discovered that their own secrets had been exposed. She informed Sam that parliamentary probes were beginning in 8 nations. 2 prime ministers are accused of corruption. The entire system is collapsing. At The Hague, where important witnesses were getting ready to testify before the International Criminal Court, Sam's team stopped an attempted assassination. The few surviving operatives of the opposition had to face a new reality. It was unsafe everywhere now. As another attack team was apprehended, Sam said, they've lost their infrastructure. Political protection is no longer available. No more support from corporations. Simply desperate men acting desperately. Eduardo welcomed international community leaders to Shadow Ridge, where they discussed how their town overcame fear to reveal the truth. The tiny Californian town had emerged as a global symbol of resistance. He clarified through interpreters that it begins with one person refusing to be fearful. And then someone else joins them. Then another. Fear soon loses all of its power. In her statement, Sister Eleanor described how corporate interests have taken advantage of weaker communities around the world. Her findings demonstrated how pharmaceutical firms concealed illegal human testing by enlisting the help of corrupt officials and criminal gangs. She clarified that they were meticulous in their selection of sites. Areas where individuals were vulnerable due to poverty. Where officials were obedient due of corruption. where questions were unsafe due to criminal violence. However, they never relied on local communities to muster the bravery. More raids were reported by international media as law enforcement targeted institutions all around the world. The identical pattern was shown by each operation. Gangs of criminals providing cover. Corrupt officials guarantee safety. Illegal research exploits vulnerable communities. Johnson reported from his expanded command center at medical data was now being evaluated. The same pharmaceutical corporations were involved in research initiatives in 15 other nations, all of which used similar concealment techniques. The Crimson Reapers who had opted for redemption assisted in locating criminal organizations in other countries. Their knowledge of how gangs had been employed as a cover was essential to revealing international activities. Blaze told foreign investigators that each group believed they were autonomous. However, we all received orders from the same individuals and had the same goal. Simply put, we were too blind to notice it. As more witnesses surfaced around the globe, Sam's team organized security. A puzzle spanning countries was put together by former facility personnel, fugitive test subjects, and even repentant gang members. Sanders said that the opposition was attempting to dominate the media in order to contain this. However, there are currently too many participating nations. They are unable to silence every witness and censor every account. Through her cross-border victim support network, Sister Eleanor assisted survivors in recovering from trauma that cut beyond linguistic and cultural barriers. The chapel that had been intimidated by gangs was now a symbol of hope for people all across the world. She addressed the assembled families from various countries that every story important. Every truth revealed contributes to keeping this from occurring elsewhere. Communities you'll never meet are protected by your bravery here. As evidence revealed larger plots, Detective Romano collaborated with international prosecutors. The network of facilities has not only engaged in illicit research. Around the world, it had tested experimental medicines on ignorant populations. She concluded that the patterns were consistent across the globe. Unauthorized testing is carried out by dishonest local officials, susceptible communities are identified, and illegal control is established. Until someone chooses to be terrified, the system is perfect. As further evidence came to an end, the sun sank on The Hague. But a new day was breaking in communities all around the planet. Voices were discovered for many who had lived in dread. Silent towns started to speak the truth. A worldwide awakening has been triggered by Shadow Ridge's example. And because of a small California town that had opted for bravery over fear, many towns throughout the world were ready to reveal their own hidden evils. The conflict, which started when gang members threatened a church, has spread throughout the world. Once stated, truth has no boundaries. Once demanded, justice was unstoppable. And one thing became evident in The Hague as Sister Eleanor wrapped up her testimony, as other witnesses stood ready to testify, and as more truth emerged from long-held bonds. Some triumphs are international in scope. They are a part of humanity. The demise of another pharmaceutical titan sent global financial markets reeling. Days after being valued at $80 billion, New Life Industries stock fell to pennies as evidence of decades of unlawful human testing surfaced. Sister Eleanor was arranging international victim compensation claims in Shadow Ridge when she got the news. Detective Romano said, her laptop displaying freefall and market tickers, 6 major companies in 3 days. Their entire research division was implicated in the invalidation of decades worth of drug patents because of unlawful testing procedures. As desperate executives tried to elude justice, Sam's crew kept an eye on company offices across the globe. International law enforcement blocked escape routes, frozen offshore money, and grounded private aircraft. Johnson issued a warning from his enlarged command center, "They're trying to destroy evidence faster than we can secure it. Paper records are being burned, and server farms are being cleared out. Everything is being burned." As corporate hired assassins attacked everyone who could testify about financial ties, the Crimson Reapers under witness protection faced fresh dangers. Twice in a week, the location of Viper's safe home was compromised. After the second attempt, he told federal authorities, "These aren't your typical hitmen. These are cleanup crews from corporations. They're not merely attempting to keep us quiet. Whole paper trails are being erased." As evidence emerged that pharmaceutical corporations had used religious organizations as a front, Sister Eleanor collaborated with international prosecutors. Unknowingly, churches, missions, and charity clinics are utilized to find test participants who are at risk. As she told a UN panel, the betrayal goes deeper than we imagined. They used more than simply criminal groups and crooked authorities. They transformed philanthropic endeavors into hunting grounds and corrupted every organization created to aid people. As corporate banking records revealed the full extent of the scheme, Detective Romano coordinated with financial crimes departments. Boardrooms of pharmaceutical businesses are the source of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and hidden research funding. During a secure call, she informed Sam that she had discovered something larger. These were not isolated businesses carrying out unlawful experiments. This was planned. They exchanged victims, data, and outcomes. The industry as a whole was complicit. Sam's group stopped corporate sabotage attempts at 3 continents worth of evidence storage sites. Employed with the last of the company's money, professional operators made a valiant effort to obliterate any evidence of management knowledge. Sanders noted the shifting strategies of the opposition. These are no longer only hired guns. They are former intelligence officers, corporate security teams, and experts at permanently erasing evidence. Eduardo and other company owners in Shadow Ridge had to deal with corporate reprisals. Bank loans were abruptly returned. Licenses are questioned. Tax audits that show from out of nowhere. Organized efforts to keep the town that had begun it all quiet. Eduardo informed the assembled community leaders, "They believe they can still frighten us. They're not understanding. Threats worse than money have already been defeated. Money is not as important as the truth." The global strategies of pharmaceutical companies were detailed by Sister Eleanor's Victim Support Network. The same process was seen everywhere. Criminal gangs were used to keep power, politicians were corrupted to avoid oversight, and local institutions were used to discover vulnerable groups. She indicated to foreign investigators that each community believed they were on their own. Evil flourishes by isolating good people in this way. However, the system started to fail as soon as we connected and shared information. Detective Romano found decades worth of proof of CEO involvement. Business executives were not only aware of unlawful testing. Perceiving disadvantaged communities as disposable study subjects, they had actively guided it. She claimed to have discovered their encrypted files and internal communications. In public, they referred to it as expedited trials. They discussed deniable research sites and disposable test groups in private. They were fully aware of their actions. Sam's group followed business leaders who were trying to escape to nations that did not require extradition. However, conventional escape routes had been blocked by international cooperation, trapping desperate billionaires in the wake of their own crimes. Johnson reported that 4 more were apprehended attempting to depart on a private yacht. 2 are trying to use diplomatic documents to cross borders. There aren't enough hiding spots left. The evidence of the Crimson Reapers revealed that pharmaceutical corporations had deliberately selected criminal groups as protection. Local criminals were ideal, they were already frightening towns, easily manipulated with drugs and money, and totally unaccountable if caught. Blaze told corporate crime investigators, "We believed we were just operating protection rackets. I had no idea that we were genuinely safeguarding their scientific initiatives. I had no idea what happened to those who vanished within those establishments." As other religious organizations realized they had been taken advantage of, Sister Eleanor collaborated with churches around the world. The same pattern showed up. Pharmaceutical corporations find test subjects through humanitarian endeavors, particularly in underprivileged areas. She informed the assembled religious leaders that they had perverted everything intended to benefit people, but they had never trusted that truth would triumph over money or that faith would triumph over fear. As deeper ties were uncovered by business documents, Detective Romano collaborated with financial investigators. Coordinated facility operations, research data sharing, banking transfers, and proof of industry-wide collaboration in unlawful experimentation. According to her explanation to prosecutors, this was more than merely parallel. These businesses collaborated, split up test populations, and shared results. They made the practice of human testing a corporate strategy. As corporate offices around the world started enforcing emergency data rules, which involved the methodical deletion of everything that could demonstrate leadership knowledge, Sam's team was able to secure crucial financial proof. As another server farm was raided, Sanders noted that they were becoming desperate. When people understand that everything is coming apart, they tend to make blunders and leave traces. As more pharmaceutical behemoths were brought to justice, the sun set on yet another day of corporate ruin. The sudden reality of an entire business based on unlawful research, human pain, and skillfully concealed crimes caused stock markets to respond. However, something more significant was taking place in Shadow Ridge, the starting point of it all. The town that had resisted criminal groups now faced off against powerful corporations. Financial intimidation was now rejected by the community that had conquered its fear of violence. Once expressed, truth cannot be taken back. Once demanded, justice could not be compromised. The conflict, which started when gang members threatened a church, revealed corporate corruption at its highest levels. One reality became evident as more proof surfaced, more CEOs were brought to prison, and more truth emerged from profit-sealed vaults. Some crimes are too serious to be concealed indefinitely. Some realities are too strong to be kept quiet. The pharmaceutical industry, which was founded on concealing misery, was in decline. And a new form of justice was rising from its ruins. One that demonstrated that no company was too large to confront reality. Human dignity is more valuable than any economic margin. As the biggest corporate criminal trial in history got underway, security at the federal courthouse increased. Marcus Davidson, the former CEO of New Life Industries, was charged with hundreds of crimes involving unlawful human testing. Sister Eleanor Harper was getting ready to lead victim testimony that would completely upend the pharmaceutical industry. 217 victims have been confirmed from Shadow Ridge alone. Federal prosecutors were briefed by Detective Romano. Each one stands in for comparable victims at facilities across the globe. The patterns are the same everywhere. Employing criminal organizations as a front to target vulnerable communities. When testimony came in from all across the world, Sam's team cooperated with federal marshals. One final desperate attempt was made to quash testimony by the opposition's surviving corporately backed death teams. Overnight, 2 additional attempts were stopped. Sanders reported from his role in Overwatch. For successful hits, they are paying mercenaries 3 times as much. However, their professional talent pools are nearly depleted. As corporate lawyers attempted to undermine the credibility of the Crimson Reapers who turned state evidence, they were given more protection. Under cross-examination, however, Viper's testimony was unquestionable. "You want to know if we were aware of what took place in those facilities?" He spoke to the defense of Davidson. "No, we were only compensated to instill fear. Prevent them from posing inquiries." However, the gang members weren't the true criminals. They were the ones in boardrooms of corporations. As more survivors came forward, Sister Eleanor engaged with global victim advocacy organizations. The same systematic exploitation was exposed in every testimony. To locate test participants, pharmaceutical corporations use poverty, desperation, and terror. She told the court that for many survivors, it's not only what was done to them that is the toughest part. It's seeing how meticulously they were picked, how they were specifically targeted because they were helpless. Detective Romano provided proof that the unlawful testing was linked to securities fraud. Test findings were altered to raise stock values, converting human pain into market profits, according to corporate financial records. She testified, they didn't just illegally experiment on people. They converted those offenses into profits for shareholders. Every dividend, stock option, and quarterly report is based on covert human testing. Desperate executives attempted to purchase or scare their way out of justice, but Sam's team stopped corporate meddling in judicial processes. However, money was no longer able to stifle the truth. Analyzing stolen data, Johnson said that they had discovered their final backup plan. They are attempting to bring down their own finance systems and erase any documentation that connects facility operations to corporate leadership. As survivors spoke about their experiences, the courtroom became silent. People who had been rescued from the streets of Shadow Ridge, forced to undergo illegal medical testing, and then intimidated into silence by gang violence. In front of Davidson, a witness said, "My brother vanished in 1995. According to the police, he was most likely engaged with drugs. We now know. He passed away while undergoing testing of the experimental treatments your company was using. His grave wasn't even marked by you." In order to reveal how pharmaceutical firms had taken advantage of non-profit organizations to find test participants, Sister Eleanor organized testimonies from religious leaders all around the world. She informed the court that they turned our willingness to assist others against us. Made us unwitting collaborators in determining groups at risk. Converted places of worship into areas where they could conduct experiments. Detective Romano provided proof of extensive corporate expertise. Internal reports, management communications, and board meeting minutes all demonstrate a systematic awareness of unlawful testing procedures. She told the jury that this was not the result of overbearing middle management or renegade researchers. The top levels of the company had ordered this to be done. They were fully aware of their actions, the people they were harming, and the number of lives they were taking. As more business executives were brought to justice, Sam's squad was able to secure the courthouse. Former finance officers, research directors, and board members are all facing proof of their involvement in decades of systematic criminal activity. Opponents are attempting to portray this as essential to advancements in medicine. Sanders said he kept an eye on the press coverage. However, survivor testimony are too compelling, have too many faces, too many tales, and include too much truth. The Shadow Writer's evidence revealed the extent to which pharmaceutical firms had used precisely targeted bribes to corrupt government offices, police departments, medical facilities, and local institutions. Blaze testified that everything was interconnected. "We never knew that we were a part of a larger, more sinister system that was set up to conceal corporate crimes, we just believed that we were regular crooks." Survivors were assisted in confronting their previous tormentors in court by Sister Eleanor's Victim Support Network. Fear-suppressed people discovered that they could speak truth to power that had before appeared unassailable. She informed the assembled families that every witness makes it more difficult for them to conceal their actions. "We get closer to justice with every story that is recounted." As evidence of international financial crimes emerged, Detective Romano worked with prosecutors from other countries. There was more to the pharmaceutical company's illicit testing. Their entire economic strategy was based on covert human testing. Pay attention to the money. She oversaw forensic accountants who checked the development history of every patent, successful medication, and scientific discovery. How many were put to the test on innocent people at places like Shadow Ridge? The final desperate corporate countermove, an attempt to use a cyber attack to destroy the primary evidence database, was stopped by Sam's team. According to Johnson, they attempted to hire top-tier hackers, but even criminals have expectations. Most of them turned down the job after learning what the corporations did. The acceptance of a plea offer by a former member of the New Life Board marked a turning point in the trial. His testimony revealed systematic abuse, decades of corporate knowledge, and the deliberate deployment of criminal gangs as security. To astonished prosecutors, he acknowledged, "We carefully selected locations like Shadow Ridge. Corrupt government, small villages, and vulnerable populations make them ideal sites for research without ethics, monitoring, or repercussions. Shadow Ridge's case served as an inspiration for similar trials around the world. As the evidence grew, the testimony persisted, and more business executives were brought to court. Communities that had been exploited by pharmaceutical companies gained the strength to seek answers. As Davidson confronted the overwhelming proof of his crimes, the sun set on yet another day of corporate reckoning. The foundations of the pharmaceutical empire he had assisted in creating on the basis of concealed misery began to collapse as the truth came to light. However, the community that had initially opted for bravery over fear looked on with silent delight in Shadow Ridge, where it all started. The town that had dealt with gang intimidation had contributed to the prosecution of powerful corporations. Once preached in a tiny California church, truth has expanded into a call for accountability on a worldwide scale. First pursued by a resolute nun and her brother, a military sniper, justice has spread around the world. One thing became evident as more trials started, as more proof surfaced, and as more information leaked out of corporate vaults. Money couldn't purchase eternal silence. No company was too large to be held accountable. The conflict, which started when gang members threatened a church, revealed crimes that had affected corporate boardrooms all across the world. A new form of justice that demonstrated that profit was no shield against the truth was emerging as a result of that exposure. When the jury foreman read the verdict, the federal courthouse exploded in suppressed emotion. As Marcus Davidson, the former CEO of New Life Industries, was brought to justice for decades of corporate wrongdoing, the words, "guilty on all counts," reverberated across the crowded chamber. Sister Eleanor Harper held hands with families and survivors in the gallery. Finally, their hard battle for the truth was justified. The judge denied bail until sentencing and declared the defendant detained into jail. Immediate incarceration is mandated due to the seriousness of the offenses and the risk of flight. Detective Romano saw the once dominant businessmen being carried away by federal marshals. She mentioned 217 consecutive life periods. In Shadow Ridge alone, one for every verified victim, multiplied by comparable institutions across the globe. Hundreds of people gathered in St. Catherine's Church to witness the live broadcast of the decision. Justice at the highest levels was now being served to the community that had endured corporate vengeance after gang intimidation. Sister Eleanor informed the gathered families that this was more than simply punishment. This is about responsibility and demonstrating that no one's human dignity is subordinated to wealth or influence. As additional verdicts came in, Sam's staff kept everything secure. Financial officials, research directors, and corporate board members are all being held accountable for their part in decades of institutionalized exploitation. Sanders said the remaining hired guns of the opposition are stepping down. No more threats, no more assassination attempts. At last, they understood it was finished. During punishment, the Crimson Reapers, who had contributed to the revelation of the truth, were given serious consideration. Although their criminal histories could not be changed, their decision to support justice made a big difference. During his appearance, Blaze told the court, "We cannot undo what we did as gang members. However, we may take pride in our role in bringing these corporate crimes to light. Something our children may one day comprehend." As the preservation of the evidence became crucial, Detective Romano coordinated with foreign law enforcement. Sustaining the chain of custody for records demonstrating corporate knowledge would be essential to future prosecutions. She led her team through every bit of evidence, every testimony, and every financial record. Everything is kept safe. This is about stopping these atrocities from happening again, not simply about the trials that are currently taking place. Survivors were assisted in processing the verdicts by Sister Eleanor's Victim Support Network. Justice was ultimately served for those who had lost loved ones, endured experiments, and lived in fear. During the support group, an elderly mother said, "My daughter vanished in '98. Even if seeing that man get punishment today doesn't bring her back, it does show that her story was heard. Her life was important." As additional CEOs faced punishment, Sam's team stopped the last desperate actions of corporate revenge. Instead of using violence, the opposition's remaining resources were directed toward pointless judicial appeals. According to Johnson, they are attempting to avoid the human cost of their actions by arguing procedural problems, keeping an eye on court filings, and anything else. However, survivor testimony is too compelling to ignore. Something more was symbolized by the Crimson Reaper's transition from criminal gang to important witnesses. The potential for forgiveness and the ability to choose good over wrong in spite of past transgressions. During his sentencing, Viper recalled that he used to believe that power comes from instilling fear in others. These businessmen have the same idea, but actual power? That results from defending the truth at all costs. As the ripple effects of justice extended around the world, Sister Eleanor collaborated with churches around the world. Communities that had experienced comparable forms of exploitation mustered the bravery to call for responsibility. During sentence proceedings, she testified that the events in Shadow Ridge were not uncommon. However, our response, choosing unity over intimidation and truth over fear, can be repeated anywhere. Detective Romano made certain that each decision was backed up by indisputable proof. Corporate attorneys were unable to identify technical or procedural deviations from the documented truth. She told federal prosecutors that every conviction establishes precedent, which establishes a legal basis for cases like this one all around the world. This is about preventing future crimes as much as it is about punishing past ones. As the final corporate opposition fell apart, Sam's crew watched. Once untouchable executives had to deal with the same legal system they had tainted to cover up their wrongdoing. As another CEO was jailed, Sam noticed that power has a funny side. It eventually turns against you the more you mistreat it. The former clubhouse of the Crimson Reapers was converted into a community center with an emphasis on addiction treatment and youth outreach. The structure that stood for terror was now used for healing. During a preventive workshop, Blaze informed teenagers that everything changes. Do you change for the better or worse, I wonder? We regret not making the better decision sooner. Sister Eleanor's mission grew to include systematic reform in addition to victim support. Her testimony ensured that similar crimes could never again be covered up by institutional power by helping to establish new corporate accountability legislation. For corporate sentencing boards, she reminded them that justice is more than punishment. It's about change, about demonstrating that in the end, truth triumphs over humanity, power, and money. As the community came to terms with their triumph, the sun began to set on Shadow Ridge. The town that had seen corporate corruption and gang intimidation had come out stronger, more cohesive, and changed. It all started with a healing and memory service led by Sister Eleanor at St. Catherine's Church. Former gang members sat next to entrepreneurs they had previously intimidated. Beside rehabilitated criminals who had contributed to the revelation of truth, survivors prayed. She warned her audience that verdicts aren't always a good indicator of success. Changed lives, healed communities, and people standing up for what's right are how they are assessed. Gang members' threats against a church sparked the conflict, which revealed corporate wrongdoing on a global scale. Legal justice alone, however, was hardly its greatest triumph. It was demonstrating the possibility of forgiveness, the ability of communities to overcome fear, and the ultimate triumph of truth. Shadow Ridge had undergone a permanent transformation, but it had done so in a positive way, becoming a symbol of what can happen when regular people decide to show remarkable bravery, when a community refuses to remain silent, and when fear is defeated by truth. And one thing became evident as more verdicts were rendered, justice was done, and more truth was released from corporate shackles. Some triumphs belong to everyone who chooses to oppose evil, regardless of how strong it may appear, not just to one community. With resounding bipartisan support, the Shadow Ridge Corporate Accountability Act passed, prompting Congress to call a special session. Sister Eleanor Harper's testimony served as the impetus for the law, which established new safeguards against corporations taking advantage of weaker areas. Survivors flocked to St. Catherine's Church to witness the president sign the historic bill into law. Sister Eleanor told the families gathered that this was about more than just stopping future crimes. It's about transforming the way power is distributed in this nation and making sure that no community is ever again silenced by threats or money. Detective Romano worked with law enforcement agencies across the country, training them to spot indications of corporate exploitation concealed beneath illegal activity. She told the cops gathered that the pattern was always the same. Corporate funds moving through covert channels, corrupt officials ignoring the situation, and organized crime expanding into weak spots. We learn from Shadow Ridge to identify it before it establishes itself. Sam's group collaborated with other towns dealing with comparable issues. Their Shadow Ridge experience served as a model for exposing corporate malfeasance across the country. He informed local organizers that while every community is unique, the fundamentals are always the same. Intimidation is inferior to unity. Fear is vanquished by truth. Communities are more resilient than companies or criminals. Similar developments in criminal groups nationwide were prompted by the reforming of the Crimson Reapers. Gang members started to turn against the corporate overlords they had unwittingly served after realizing there was hope for redemption. Blaze told a young intervention program that they used to believe we were just ordinary criminals. I had no idea we were being used for anything more sinister, but now we can help put an end to it. Instead of endangering communities, use our experience to safeguard them. The Shadow Ridge Foundation was founded by Sister Eleanor to aid communities that are being exploited by corporations. The organization addressed both practical and personal needs by fusing spiritual healing with legal activism. She informed her growing network of volunteers that every survivor has unique needs. Some people require legal assistance. Some people require therapy. Some people only need to be aware that they are not alone. We offer healing in whatever form it takes for each individual. The evidence preservation techniques used by Detective Romano have become commonplace in corporate crime investigations. Her methodical approach to recording corruption had an impact on law enforcement training across the country. She gave a talk at the FBI Academy about the importance of physical evidence. Testimony from survivors is more important than financial documents. Corporate defenses are more easily breached by human tales than by spreadsheets. Sam's group created security procedures to safeguard witnesses and whistleblowers. Other towns were able to resist intimidation thanks to their experience stopping corporate reprisal. Sanders informed the local security teams that they would try everything: character assassination, bribery, and threats. However, those strategies become ineffective once a community comes together. Areas historically dominated by gang violence were turned into hubs for youth outreach, addiction treatment, and economic growth, and the Crimson Reapers' former territories were converted into areas for community improvement. Viper reminded troubled teens that anything can change. As a criminal, gang leader, and someone who harmed his own community, I was the nightmare of society. I now assist in protecting others. Your future does not have to be defined by your past. As the Shadow Ridge model gained traction around the world, Sister Eleanor collaborated with international organizations. Communities all throughout the world learned to spot and oppose corporate exploitation that was passed off as regular crime. To the United Nations, she said, "What happened in our town wasn't unique, but how we overcame it with unity, courage, and unwavering commitment to truth can be replicated anywhere." Reform in law enforcement agencies across the country was spurred by Detective Romano's investigations. Departments created new protocols for determining the corporate influence underlying illegal activity. She told other investigators to follow the money. Typically, street crime remains local. You may tell that something more significant is lurking in the shadows when you discover intricate organizational and financial networks. Community organizers received security awareness training from Sam's team. Ordinary people learn how to defend themselves and their neighbors from corporate and criminal dangers. He clarified at workshops that security is more than just using force. It all comes down to awareness, communication, and solidarity. Communities are more difficult to frighten when they band together. Beyond providing direct assistance to victims, the Shadow Ridge Foundation broadened its scope of work. Now, the group sought to stop corporate abuse before it could spread to communities that were already at risk. Sister Eleanor told state lawmakers that prevention is more important than punishment. In order to prevent future crimes, systemic improvements are just as important as accountability for past ones. Detective Romano created initiatives to support law enforcement with gang members who have changed their ways. Together with police resources, their street expertise produced effective techniques to combat corporate wrongdoing. She told officials who were dubious that they were aware of the indicators. They are aware of how businesses hide behind criminal organizations. We are able to stop exploitation before it begins thanks to their experience. The metamorphosis of Shadow Ridge served as a case study for communal healing. Reformers, legal professionals, and sociologists examined the town's efforts to combat corporate and criminal corruption. Unity was the key, Sam told the researchers. Not only between civilians and law enforcement, but also between adversaries. Real change was made possible when victims and ex-offenders united against corporate exploitation. As many communities implemented the lessons learned from Shadow Ridge, Sister Eleanor's efforts gained respect on a global scale. The tiny Californian community that overcame corporate malfeasance and gang intimidation rose to prominence as a global beacon of hope. She reminded the meetings that decision is the first step toward change. The decision to face fear, to stand up for what is right, and to have faith that healing is possible even after horrible wrongs. As the community continued to change, the sun set on Shadow Ridge. Once living in terror, the town now offered bravery to others. The location that formerly harbored sinister secrets now promoted openness and truth. It all started when Sister Eleanor led prayers for communities still fighting exploitation at St. Catherine's Church. After gang members threatened a church, the conflict had grown into something far bigger. A demonstration of human tenacity, a model for transformation, and a campaign for justice. One fact became evident as more communities gained courage, as more truths were revealed, and as more healing became feasible. Fear, wealth, or corporate influence are not the greatest powers. It is seen in common people deciding to stick together for what is right at all costs. The story of Shadow Ridge was more than just a revelation of past wrongdoing. It was about demonstrating what can happen when groups of people refuse to be silenced, when the truth triumphs over fear, and when healing turns both victims and perpetrators into agents of constructive change. Hundreds of people gathered at St. Catherine's for a celebration and memory ritual a year after gang members threatened a church in Shadow Ridge. Standing at the same altar where she had previously confronted the Crimson Reapers, Sister Eleanor Harper spoke to an audience that included community leaders from all over the country, survivors of corporate crime, and ex-gang members. With the quiet strength that has transformed the town, she started, they believed they could use fear to silence us a year ago. They never realized that real strength lies in conquering fear rather than in inciting it. In the front pew, Detective Romano recalled how a straightforward gang investigation had revealed global corporate misdeeds. Law enforcement academies around the country had adopted her techniques for tracking corruption as regular practice. After the service, she addressed the assembled cops that sometimes justice begins small. One individual defying intimidation, one community choose to unite, and one truth refusing to be hidden. From the bell tower, where he had already positioned snipers, Sam saw. Although his team had assisted other towns in dealing with comparable dangers, Shadow Ridge stood out as the location where they discovered that community protection required more than simply tactical measures. He told visiting community organizers that security is about togetherness and people deciding to stand together against intimidation, whether it comes from corporate boardrooms or street gangs. Security is not just about having a lot of guns. Programs assisting other gang members in reforming were now run by the Crimson Reapers who had made the decision to turn to redemption. Similar improvements were sparked countrywide by their transformational narrative. Blaze, who once believed that having authority meant instilling fear in others, catered to youth who were at risk of joining a gang. We now realize that true power is standing up for something greater than ourselves and assisting others in overcoming fear. Sister Eleanor's Victim Support Network had grown into a global organization that assisted communities all over the world in identifying and opposing corporate exploitation that was passed off as regular criminal activity. She informed the leaders that while the struggles of each town are different, the fundamentals are always the same. Communities are stronger than any entity attempting to suppress them, truth triumphs over fear, and solidarity beats intimidation. Corporate lawyers were unable to contest the truth that Detective Romano had preserved through his methods of evidence preservation. Her methodical approach to recording corruption served as a template for comparable inquiries around the world. She told international investigators to follow the patterns. Corporate money moving through covert channels, dishonest officials ignoring it, and criminal gangs offering cover. You can't ignore the indications once you've noticed them. Sam's crew stayed in Shadow Ridge because it had come to represent what communities could accomplish, not because the town required protection. From his previous observation post, Sanders thought, "People ask why we stay. This community serves as a reminder of why we do what we do and how common people may unite to defeat great evil." Once a representation of terror, the Crimson Reaper's old clubhouse was now a communal hub that assisted disturbed children in finding better ways to live their lives. Former gang members collaborated with their former victims, working together to keep others from committing the same errors. Teenagers looking for direction were advised by Viper that everything has a purpose. We learn from even our saddest moments. We now apply those lessons to help others choose light over darkness and avoid our mistakes. Recalling how the food bank at St. Catherine had previously been threatened by gangs, Sister Eleanor strolled through it. It is being used as a template for community outreach initiatives across the country. She told visiting religious leaders, "We don't just feed people here. We demonstrate to them what can happen when people choose to stand together in spite of their differences and when communities refuse to be split by fear." Because of Detective Romano's efforts, law enforcement's approach to corporate crime has changed for the better. When there were indications of systematic organization in criminal activity, departments around the country learned to investigate further. She told police school grads that the traditional approach to street crime was to treat its symptoms while ignoring the corporate corruption that underlies it. We learned to look at the big picture at Shadow Ridge. Sam made a noteworthy observation in his last security evaluation of Shadow Ridge. The town had become immune from intimidation. No corporate interest or criminal group could ever again use terror to dominate it. He told visiting security experts that the strongest protection is community awareness. People become impossible to frighten when they realize that their strength lies in solidarity and when they refuse to let fear silence them. At St. Catherine's, the service ended with a potent sign of change. Alongside their former victims, ex-gang members who had threatened the church now assisted in serving communion. The very altar where coercion had failed was transformed into a healing space for everyone. Before they occur, certain improvements appear unattainable. Sister Eleanor informed her congregation. Until we find it together, some healing seems unattainable. Until we unite to defend it, some truths appear too strong to face. The village that had fought against corporate and criminal corruption stood as a tribute to human potential as the sun sank on Shadow Ridge, creating long shadows that filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine. The conflict, which started when gang members threatened a church, revealed crimes that had affected corporate boardrooms all across the world. Its greatest triumph, however, went beyond simply bringing justice or the truth to light. Its true success lay in demonstrating what happens when people choose truth over silence, unity over separation, and courage over fear. When victims and reformed perpetrators unite, when a community refuses to be intimidated, when common people discover incredible strength in solidarity. Shadow Ridge was eternally altered, but in a positive way, emerging as a lighthouse guiding people toward light rather than merely a community that had triumphed over its terrible past. One thing became evident as Sister Eleanor concluded the ritual that marked the beginning of it all, as erstwhile adversaries united in a common goal, and as a community rejoiced in its metamorphosis. The greatest power lies not in inciting fear but in assisting others in conquering it. In promoting truth, not in suppressing it. Communities should be brought together for something bigger than themselves, not divided. The light that began in a small California church has spread throughout the world, demonstrating to communities that people who are unified in their support of the truth are impervious to intimidation, whether it comes from corporate boardrooms or street gangs. Some triumphs alter the situation more than others. They alter people's hearts. They transform communities. They fundamentally alter people's perceptions of what is feasible. The greatest power of all is contained in that transformation, the ability of regular people to band together for what is right, regardless of the price, the odds, or the length of time it takes to get from darkness to light. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.